Very much. Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having this hearing. Thank you for being here, Mr. Hegseth. And I want to join in expressing appreciation and respect for your service to our country. And thanks to all the veterans who are here today. And thank you for your service as the ranking member of the Veterans Affairs Committee. I hope we can focus on doing better for our veterans and doing better in management of the Department of Defense. There's always room for improvement. I think what we need in that position is not just better, but the best in financial management, because those decisions are life and death decisions affecting the 3.4 million Americans who serve our national security and our national defense and put their lives on the line. I want to talk about financial mismanagement at the two organizations that you headed, which are the only test of your financial management that we have before this committee, the Veterans for Freedom and Concerned Veterans for America. You took over the Veterans for Freedom in 2007. In 2008, you raised $8.7 million, but spent more than $9 million, creating a deficit. By January 2009, you told donors that the organization had less than $1,000 in the bank and debts of $434,000. By 2010, revenue at the Veterans for Freedom had dropped to about $265,000. In the next year, it had dropped further to $22,000. You don't dispute these numbers, do you?
Senator, I'm extremely proud of the work me and my fellow vets did at Vets for Freedom. A bunch of young vets with no political experience, a small group, working hard every single day. We raised donor funds. And we have letters submitted for the record from almost everyone that worked with me every single day, including our chief operating officer, who will attest that every dollar we raised was used intentionally toward the execution of our mission, which is supporting the warfighters, exactly why we're here today, the warfighters in the Iraq surge. There was a campaign in 2008, Senator. It was Barack Obama versus John McCain.
Ask you another
we believed
question,
John McCain would be the right person to win, and so we spent
the tax
more.
Returns from that organization.
I'm glad they're for the record.
I'm going to ask to be entered into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
These tax returns are yours. They have your signature. And I'm going to ask that members of the committee review them because they're the only documents. I've asked for others. I've asked for the FBI report that would presumably document, it should have documented, this kind of financial mismanagement. And these are the 990s from that organization. By the year of 2011, donors had become so dissatisfied with that mismanagement, they, in effect, ousted you. They merged that organization with Military Families United, and thereafter, you joined a second organization as executive director.
In between, Senator, I went to Harvard University for 2 years and Afghanistan.
I want to ask you questions about Concerned Veterans for America. Again, another set of tax returns, the 990s from that organization. I ask they be made part of the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection. Both of those returns are now part of the record.
2011 to 2016. At the end of 2013, shortfall of $130,000. At the end of 2014, shortfall of $428,000. You had a surplus the following year, but then another deficit of $437,000. By the time you left, that organization had deep debts, including credit card transaction debts of about $75,000. That isn't the kind of fiscal management we want at the Department of Defense. We can't tolerate it at the Department of Defense. That's an organization with a budget of $850 billion, not 10 or 15 million, which was the case at those two organizations. And it has command responsibility for 3.4 million Americans. The highest number that you managed in those two organizations was maybe 50 people. Let me ask you, how many men and women now serve in the United States Army? What is Sen's strength?
Senator, I would like an opportunity to respond to
Well, I've asked you a
impugning
question.
of my leadership of a veterans organization. Concerned
currently
Veterans for
serve?
America. You're on the VA committee, sir, and I appreciate your service there. The VA Accountability Act and the Mission Act were all brainchilds of Concerned Veterans for America. We used our donor money very intentionally and focused to create policy that bettered the lives of veterans.
Mr. Hegseth, I'm asking you a very simple question. How many men and women currently serve in the United States Army?
Senator, the United States Army, 450,000 on active duty, sir.
And how many in the Navy?
And the Navy is 425, sir.
Well, it's 337 this year. How many in the Marine Corps?
175,000, sir.
172,300. Those numbers dwarf any experience you had by many multiples. I don't believe that you can tell this committee or the people of America that you are qualified to lead them. I would support you as the spokesperson for the Pentagon. I don't dispute your communication skills, but I believe that we are entitled to the facts here. I've asked for more documents. I assume you'd be willing to submit to an expanded FBI background check that interviews your colleagues, accountants, ex-wives, former spouses, sexual assault survivors, and others, and enable them to come forward.
Senator, I'm not in charge of FBI background checks.
But you would submit to it and support it.
I'm not in charge of FBI background checks.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. I at this point, want to submit a letter from Captain Wade Zirkle, the founder of Vets for Freedom and the person who hired Pete Hegseth to run the organization. Although the 2008 financial crisis dried up fundraising for nonprofits, Captain Zirkle says, and I quote, "Pete responded to this crisis with decisive action by reducing staff and renegotiating all debts with creditors until they were fairly resolved, an impressive feat and a testament to Pete's character." Pete departed VFF in 2010 to take on a new role with Concerned Veterans for America. Pete departed on good terms. Without objection, that will be added to the record. Senator Ernst, you're recognized for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter submitted by Mr. Mark Lucas, who is a fellow Iowan and Iowa Army National Guard member. Mr. Lucas and I served together in the Iowa Army National Guard. He succeeded Pete Hegseth as Executive Director of Concerned Veterans for America. And in his letter, Mr. Lucas says that Mr. Hegseth, quote, laid a strong foundation that postured CVA for long-term success, end quote. And that Mr. Hegseth, quote, continued to be an invaluable asset to both me as a leader and the organization, end quote. So I would ask for unanimous consent to enter this Washington Times article and the letter from Mr. Mark Lucas into the record.
Without objection.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Hegseth, and thank you very much. I appreciate your service to our nation. It's something that I know you are very proud of, and it is something that we have in common and that we share. You and I have had many productive conversations. And just for our audience, we have had very frank conversations. Is that correct, Mr. Hegseth?
Senator, that is a correct characterization.
You know that I don't keep anything hidden, pull no punches. My colleagues know that as well. So I do appreciate you sitting down and allowing me the opportunity to question you thoroughly on those issues that are of great importance to me. Just to recap those issues, three that are very important. One is the DOD and making sure that we have a clean audit. The second is women in combat, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And the third was maintaining high standards and making sure that we are combating sexual assault in the military. Okay, so Mr. Hegseth, I'm going to address the issue because this will tie into some of the financial concerns that have been raised here as well. And it's why, you know, I, trusting my fellow Iowan, asked for unanimous consent of his letter to go into the record. But like me, a lot of Iowans are really, really concerned and upset about the wasteful Washington and of course, in our Pentagon. It's an issue that I have been combating for years. So there's significant room for greater efficiency and cost cutting within the department. And the DOD is the only federal agency that has never passed an audit. As the Senate DOJ caucus chair and founder, that's unacceptable to me, and it should be unacceptable to you as well. So I appreciate that in your opening statement. What are those steps that you will take to ensuring the Pentagon has a clean audit by the year 2028?
Senator, I appreciate your work on this topic, which you've been involved in for a long time. You mentioned Concerned Veterans for America. I just want to clarify, we have very generous donors who set a very clear budget that we stuck to every single year. So the latitude there was restricted, and we worked very hard and diligently inside it. You've also been a leader on the Pentagon audit for a very long time. I think when we met, Senator, I said 2014 was the first year. We discovered a 2013 op-ed I wrote about the need for a Pentagon audit because an audit is an issue of national security and frankly, respect to American taxpayers who give $850 billion over to the Defense Department and expect that we know where that money goes. And if that money is going somewhere that doesn't add to tooth and instead fat or tail, we need to know that. Or if it's wasted, we need to know that. So I think previous secretaries of defense, with all due respect, haven't necessarily emphasized the strategic prerogative of an audit. And myself, my deputy SecDef, and others already know that a Pentagon audit will be the comptroller, others central to ensuring we find those dollars that can be used elsewhere. Legally under the law inside the Pentagon. So you have my word, it will be a priority.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to women in combat, and I had the privilege of serving in uniform for over 23 years between our Army Reserves and our Iowa Army National Guard, did serve in Kuwait and missions in Iraq. And so it is incredibly important that I stress, and I hope that if confirmed, you continue to stress that every man and woman has opportunity to serve their country in uniform and do so at any level as long as they are meeting the standards that are set forward. And we talked about that in my office. I do believe in high standards. Now, I was denied the opportunity to serve in any combat role because I have a lot of gray hair. And the policy has changed since then, okay? So I've been around for quite a while. But for the young women that are out there now and can meet those standards, and again, I'll emphasize they should be very, very high standards. They must physically be able to achieve those standards so that they can complete their mission. But I want to know, again, let's make it very clear for everyone here today. As Secretary of Defense, will you support women continuing to have the opportunity to serve in combat roles?
Senator, first of all, thank you for your service, as we discussed extensively as well.
It's my privilege.
And my answer is yes, exactly the way that you caveated it. Yes, women will have access to ground combat roles, given the standards remain high, and we'll have a review to ensure the standards have not been eroded in any one of these cases. That'll be part of one of the first things we do at the Pentagon is reviewing that in a gender-neutral way, the standards, ensuring readiness, and meritocracy is front and center, but absolutely, it would be the privilege of a lifetime if confirmed, to be the Secretary of Defense for all men and women in uniform who fight so heroic. They have so many other options. They decide to put their right hand up for our country, and it would be an honor to have a chance to lead them.
Thank you. And just very briefly, we only have less than a minute left, but we have also discussed this in my office. A priority of mine has been combating sexual assault in the military and making sure that all of our service members are treated with dignity and respect. This has been so important. Senator Gillibrand and I have worked on this, and we were able to get changes made to the Uniform Code of Military Justice to make sure that we have improvements and on how we address the tragic and life-altering issues of rape, sexual assault. It will demand time and attention from the Pentagon under your watch if you are confirmed. So as Secretary of Defense, will you appoint a senior level official dedicated to sexual assault prevention and response?
Senator, as we have discussed, yes, I will.
Okay, and my time has expired. Thank you for your answers.
Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hegseth, welcome.
Thank you.
I am focused on your fitness to serve, including your character and temperament and your overall qualifications to do the job. And I do appreciate the comments of Ranking Member Reed with his concerns regarding your nomination, because I share those concerns. As part of my responsibility as a member of this committee to ensure the fitness of all nominees to come before any of the committees on which I sit, I ask the following two initial questions. First, since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement relating to this kind of conduct?
Senator, I was falsely accused in October of 2017. It was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared.
I don't think completely cleared is accurate, but the fact is that your own lawyer said that you entered into an NDA and paid a person who accused you of raping her a sum of money to make sure that she did not file a complaint. Moving on. As Secretary, you will be in charge of maintaining good order and discipline by enforcing the Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ. In addition to the sexual assault allegations, and by the way, the answer to my second question should have been yes. I have read multiple reports of your regularly being drunk at work, including by people who worked with you at Fox News. Do you know that being drunk at work is prohibited for service members under the UCMJ?
Senator, those
Yes
are
or no?
multiple false anonymous reports peddled by NBC
Do you
News
know that
run directly
drinking on the job
contradictory to
is
the dozens of men and women at
not
Fox News
contemplated
Channel
and-
who
I'm not
I work
hearing-
with
I'm
who
not
came
hearing
on
the
the
answer to my
record
question.
and said they've
In your
never
opening
seen
statement,
that.
Mr. Hegseth, you commit to holding leaders accountable at all levels. That includes you, of course. And frankly, as Secretary, you will be on the job 24/7. You recently promised some of my Republican colleagues that you stopped drinking and won't drink if confirmed, correct?
Absolutely.
Will you resign as Secretary of Defense if you drink on the job, which is a 24/7 position?
I've made this commitment on behalf of the
Will you
men and women I'm
resign as
serving.
Secretary of Defense
I've
if
made this
you
commitment
drink
on
on the
behalf of
job?
the men and women I'm serving.
I'm not
because it's the
hearing-
most important deployment
I'm not
of my
hearing an
life.
answer to my question, so I'm going to move on. While you have made that commitment, you will not commit to resigning if you drink on the job. As Secretary of Defense, you will swear an oath to the Constitution and not an oath to any man, woman, or president, correct?
Senator, on multiple occasions, including as a young second lieutenant, I have sworn an oath to the
Answer is
Constitution,
yes.
and I'm proud to do so. Yes, ma'am.
In June of 2020, then President Trump directed former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper to shoot protesters in the legs in downtown D.C. an order Secretary Esper refused to comply with. Would you carry out such an order from President Trump?
Senator, I was in the Washington, D.C. National Guard unit that was in Lafayette Square during those
Would you
events,
carry
holding
out
a
an
riot
order to
shield on
shoot
behalf of my
protesters
country.
in the legs?
I saw 50
as
Secret
directed
Service agents
to
get injured
Secretary
by
Esper?
rioters trying to jump over the fence, set
Again,
the church on fire, and destroy
You know
a
what?
statue.
That sounds to me that you will
Chaos.
comply with such an order. You will shoot protesters in the leg. Moving on. President-elect has attacked our allies in recent weeks, refusing to rule out using military force to take over Greenland and the Panama Canal, and threatening to make Canada the 51st state. Would you carry out an order from President Trump to seize Greenland, a territory of our NATO ally Denmark, by force, or would you comply with an order to take over the Panama Canal?
Senator, I will emphasize that President Trump received 77 million votes to be the lawful
We're
commander-in-chief
not
of
talking
this
about
country.
the election. My question is, would you use our military to take over Greenland or an ally of Denmark?
Senator, one of the things that President Trump is so good at is never strategically tipping his hand. And so I would never in this public forum give one way or another direct what orders the president would give me in any context.
That sounds to me that you would contemplate carrying out such an order to basically invade Greenland and take over the Panama Canal. Current DoD policy allows service members and eligible dependents to be reimbursed for travel associated with non-covered reproductive health care, including abortions. Will you maintain this common sense policy?
Senator, I've always been personally pro-life. I know President Trump has as well, and we will review all policies, but our standard is whatever the president wants on this particular issue. With my advice, I will take a look at.
If the president tells you that this
I don't
common
believe
sense
the federal-
policy will not be maintained, you will not enable our service members to seek reproductive care. So it
I
sounds
don't
like to
believe the
me.
federal government
I'm not
should be
hearing
funding
answers to my questions,
travel for
Mr.
abortion.
Chairman. I just want to note that the other area that of serious concern to me is President Trump saying that he wants to use the military to help with mass deportations, which will cost billions of dollars. And what that will do to readiness is very, very concerning. Mr. Hegseth, I have noticed a disturbing pattern. You previously have made a series of inflammatory statements about women in combat, LGBTQ service members, Muslim Americans, and Democrats. Since your nominations, however, you have walked those back on TV in interviews and most recently in your opening statements. You are no longer on Fox and Friends, Mr. Hegseth. If confirmed, your words, actions, and decisions will have real impacts on national security and our service members' lives. There are close to 3 million personnel in the Department of Defense, $900 billion budget. I hardly think you are prepared to do the job. Thank you, Mr.
Senator,
Chairman.
Thank you. That wasn't a question, Mr. Hegseth. Thank you, Senator Rono. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Hegseth. Congratulations on your nomination, and thank you and your family for your service and sacrifice.
Thank you, Senator.
Now for the most important question you will receive all day. In 1935, before the Congress, the father of the United States Air Force, General Billy Mitchell, was testifying about a certain place in the world. He said, quote, "I believe that in the future, whoever holds this place will control the world. This location is the most strategic place in the world." What place was Billy Mitchell talking about? And let me give you a hint, it wasn't Greenland.
I believe he was talking about the great state of Alaska.
He was talking about the great state of Alaska. Great answer. If confirmed, will you commit to come with me to the great state of Alaska and meet our warriors who are on the front lines every day?
Senator, I have, and as I mentioned to you in the past, I did a brief training exercise up at Fort Wainwright at a previous part of my military life. I look forward to returning.
Great. And I will say we are on the front lines with this new era of authoritarian aggression. In Alaska, the last 2 years, we've had Chinese and Russian naval task forces, joint strategic bomber task forces, NREEZ, NRAIDIS, and after his election, President Trump put out an extensive statement on Alaska, which included the following statement: "We will ensure Alaska gets even more defense investments as we fully rebuild our military, especially as Russia and China are making menacing moves in the Pacific." Mr. Hegseth, if confirmed, will you work with me, this committee, and the incoming?
Good morning, everyone. I'm not listening to a lot of these Republican senators, these clowns. Yeah. Oh man, I'm on the West Coast here, so I'm trying to I'm actually considering a move to Washington D.C. just because these early mornings are brutal, waking up and watching basically the world unfold. Hours ago. So this confirmation hearing has been going on for about an hour and a half. I'm going to probably just skip through these Republican questions because they're all just incredibly unserious. Okay, we have Senator Kane here. Let's
Do you think our military
will pass its
and our military will follow that order?
Hope you guys are doing
military will
well.
follow that order, Senator.
Gladly.
It's been
Gladly,
a rough
because they
few
want to
months
focus on
here
lethality
since
and
the
war
election.
fighting and get all the
A rough,
woke, political
2.5
prerogative,
months,
politically
but,
correct, social justice,
we're gonna get through it.
political stuff out of the military.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Hegseth.
Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Hegseth. I'm looking forward to this opportunity to talk. I want to return to the incident that you referenced a minute ago that occurred in Monterey, California in October 2017. At that time, you were still married to your second wife, correct?
I believe so.
And you had just fathered a child by a woman who would later become your third wife, correct?
Senator, I was falsely charged,
Hey,
fully
you-
investigated, and completely cleared.
So you think you were completely cleared because you committed no crime. That's your definition of cleared? You had just fathered a child 2 months before by a woman that was not your wife. I am shocked
Sounds like
that
Donald
you would
Trump.
stand here and say you're completely cleared.
Oh, my goodness.
Can
I
you
had no
so
idea about his
casually
wives and
cheat
his child.
on a second wife and cheat on the mother of a child that had been born 2 months before,
Wow.
and you tell us you are completely cleared? How is that a complete clear?
Senator, her child's name is Gwendolyn Hope Hegseth, and she's a child of God, and she's 7 years old.
And she
I'm
was,
glad
and
she's here.
you cheated on the mother of that child less than
Child of
2 months
God,
after
man.
that daughter was born, didn't you?
Those were false charges.
Well,
It
no,
was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared. And I am so
you've ad-
grateful
you've
for the marriage
admitted-
I have to this
No,
amazing woman behind me.
you've admitted that you had sex at that hotel in October 2017. You said it was consensual, isn't that correct?
Anything,
You've admitted that it was consensual, and you were still married, and you just had a child by another woman.
again,
How do you explain your
completely
judgment?
false charges against me.
You no,
Fully
Not answering the
investigated,
question.
and I was completely cleared.
You have admitted that you had sex while you were married to wife 2 after you just had fathered a child by wife 3. You've admitted that. Now, if it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
It was a false claim then and a false claim now.
If it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
That was a false claim.
So
Just
you
talking
can't,
about a hypothetical.
so you can't tell me whether someone who has committed a sexual assault is disqualified from being Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I know in my instance, and I'm talking about my instance only, it was a false claim.
But you acknowledge
And
you
it was
cheat, but
fully
you acknowledge
investigated.
that you cheated on your wife and that you cheated on the woman by whom you had just fathered a child. You have admitted that.
I will allow your words to speak for themselves.
You're not retracting that today. That's good. I assume that in each of your weddings, you've pledged to be faithful to your wife. You've taken an oath to do that, haven't you?
Senator, as I've acknowledged to everyone in this committee, not a perfect person, not claiming to
But
be.
no, I just asked a simple question. You've taken an oath like you would take an oath to be Secretary of Defense in all of your weddings to be faithful to your wife. Is that correct?
I have failed in things in my life, and thankfully I'm redeemed by my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
In finalizing divorces from your first and second wives, were there non-disclosure agreements in connection with those divorces?
Senator, not that I'm aware of.
If there were, would you agree to release those first and second wives from any confidentiality agreement?
Senator, it's not something I'm aware of.
But if there were, you would agree to release them from a confidentiality agreement?
Senator, that's not my responsibility.
Did you ever engage in any acts of physical violence against any of your wives?
Senator, absolutely not.
But you would agree with me that if someone had committed physical violence against a spouse, that would be disqualifying to serve as Secretary of Defense, correct?
Senator, absolutely not have I ever done that.
You would agree that that would be a disqualifying offense, would you not?
Senator, you're talking about a hypothetical.
I don't think it's a hypothetical. Violence against spouses occurs every day. And if you as a leader are not capable of saying that physical violence against a spouse should be a disqualifying fact for being secretary of the most powerful nation in the world, you're demonstrating an astonishing lack
Well, we've
of
got a
judgment.
problem.
The
Also, if you
incident
tell
in
your
Monterey
wives you're
led
going
to
to
a
be
criminal
faithful
charge,
and
a
then
criminal
you go and
investigation, a
cheat on
private
them
settlement,
when
and a
your
cash payment to the
wife
woman
just
who
had a
filed the
child,
complaint.
how can
And
we
there was
really
also a
trust,
non-disclosure
anything you're
agreement,
saying
correct?
here?
It was a confidential settlement agreement off of a nuisance lawsuit.
Right. During an interview, you claimed that you settled the matter because you were worried that if it became public, it might hurt your career. Do you maintain that you were blackmailed?
Senator, I maintain that false claims were made against me. And ultimately,
Your attorney
those
used
false
the frame,
claims,
your-
I have the opportunity to attest my innocence in those false claims.
But you didn't reveal any of this to President Trump or the transition team as they were considering you to be nominated for Secretary of Defense. You didn't reveal the action. You didn't reveal the criminal complaint. You didn't reveal the criminal investigation. You didn't reveal the settlement. You didn't reveal the cash payment. Why didn't you inform the commander-in-chief and the transition team of this very relevant event?
Senator, I've appreciated every part of the process with the transition team. They have been open and honest with me. We've had great conversations between the two of us, and I appreciate the opportunity that President-elect Trump has given me.
You chose not to reveal this, right? Because you knew it would hurt your chances. So you chose not to reveal this really important thing to the commander-in-chief and the transition team because you were worried about your chances rather than trying to be candid with the future president of the United States. Are there any other important facts that you chose not to reveal to the president-elect and his team as they were considering you to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I sit here before you an open book, as everyone who's watched this process.
With multiple non-disclosure and
A very
confidentiality agreements
edited,
tying the hands of many people who
highly
would like
edited
to comment
open
to
book.
us. Much has been made of your workplace behavior as a leader of nonprofit veterans organizations and as a Fox News contributor. Were you fired from either of the leadership positions with the nonprofits?
I was the leader. I was the CEO of Concerned
I know
Veterans
which
for
ones,
America
but
and
those
executive
two,
director
were
of
you
Vets for
fired?
Freedom.
Were you fired from either
And I
of
was
them?
never fired from a
Do you have
veterans organization.
Do you have non-disclosure agreements with either of those organizations?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator.
Many of your work colleagues have said that you show up for work under the influence of alcohol or drunk. I know you've denied that, but you would agree with me, right, that if that was the case, that would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense.
Senator, those are all anonymous false claims, and the totality
They're not
of
anonymous.
the letters
We've
on the
seen-
record here.
They're not anonymous.
On the record, people
We've
who've
seen
worked
records
me
with
at
names
Vets
attached
for
to them.
Freedom, Concerned Vets for America, and Fox News
One of
attributing
your-
to me
one of your
being
colleagues
working
said-
hard every day on behalf of
One of
my
your
mission.
colleagues said that you got drunk at an event at a bar and chanted, "Kill all Muslims." Another colleague, not anonymous, we have this, said that you took coworkers to a strip club. You were drunk, you tried to dance with strippers, you had to be held off the stage, and one of your employees in that event filed a sexual harassment charge as a result of it. Now, I know you denied these things, but isn't that the kind of behavior that, if true, would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, anonymous false
Senator,
charges.
They're not
all-
anonymous.
it's all
And I'll
anonymous.
just conclude and say this.
It's all
to the chairman.
it's all
You
fake
claim that
news.
this was all anonymous.
Who does it sound
We
like?
have seen records with names attached to all of these, including the name of your own mother, So don't make this into some anonymous press thing. We have seen multiple names of colleagues consistently throughout your career that have talked about your abusive actions,
Chairman, I
attitudes,
think he's
words,
over
and
his time.
statements.
He's way
with
over
him.
his time.
I now yield.
And thank you very much.
Another
I,
Republican senator has
now
to step
ask
in.
unanimous consent
This is
to
getting
enter into
getting too ugly for
the record
Pete.
a family
Donald.
court order.
Tim, stop
concerning
embarrassing us.
The appointment of parenting time
What clowns?
between Mr. Hegseth and Mrs. Samantha Hegseth.
What clowns?
It states that there were no claims of domestic abuse or probable evidence of abuse in the
here comes the chairman,
relationship.
trying to
Without
clean it up.
objection, that will be added to the record. And we now move
Tim
to
Kaine, that was
Senator Kramer.
fucking
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Hegseth, for your service, for your
That was
willingness
awesome.
to endure this. And I'm sorry for what has been happening to you, particularly
How about
the
you
very
apologize to the
idea
American
that you should
people
have to sit
that we have
there
to endure
and
this.
answer hypothetical potential in somebody's imagination crimes that may take place at some point. And wouldn't that disqualify you if you were a murderer or if you were a rapist? Unfair, unfair, and I'm embarrassed for this behavior.
If
But
he
first,
were a rapist,
I want to say thank you for your
Yikes.
strong proclamation,
Yikes.
unapologetic proclamation of faith in Jesus Christ. I sat here and listened to your opening statement and thought, wow, this is a guy who in today's culture is willing to stand up and say the first thing is first, faith in Jesus Christ. And I was reminded of what Christ said in Matthew, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and these things shall be added unto you. You are going to have a great future.
Yeah,
as our
you're not a
secretary, and I
fanatic.
look forward to that day happening. I also want to get back to, you mentioned, and it got rather dismissed quickly, pivoted, as a lot of things do. You'd mentioned that you were not able to serve with your National Guard unit in the protection of the inauguration of Joe Biden because of a tattoo, a Christian tattoo. Can you elaborate just a little bit on what is this very offensive, extremist, racist tattoo that you have?
It's a tattoo I have right here, Senator. It's called the Jerusalem Cross. It's a historic Christian symbol. In fact, interestingly, recently I attended briefly the memorial ceremony of former President Jimmy Carter on the floor of our National Cathedral. On the front page of his program was the very same Jerusalem Cross. It is a Christian religious symbol. And when the events happened before preceding the Biden inauguration, I was a part of the mobilization to defend that inauguration as someone who'd been a proud supporter of Donald Trump, but also a member of the military, had orders to come to Washington, D.C. to guard that inauguration. And at the last minute, those orders were revoked. I'd never had orders revoked before. I'd been on orders to a lot of places to do a lot of difficult and dangerous things. They were revoked, and I was not told why. Later, when I wrote my book, I was able to get information that was because I had been identified. Someone who'd served in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Guantanamo Bay, holding a riot shield outside the White House. I'd been identified as an extremist, as someone unworthy of guarding the inauguration of an incoming American president. And if that's happening to me, Senator, how many other men and women, how many other patriots, how many other people of conscience? We haven't even talked about COVID and the tens of thousands of service members who were kicked out because of an experimental vaccine. In President Trump's Defense Department, they will be apologized to, they will be reinstituted with pay and rank. Things like focusing on extremism, Senator, have created a climate inside our ranks that feel political when it hasn't ever been political. Those are the types of things that are going to change. And Senator Sullivan, you mentioned that study. After a whole study was held, extremism working group study, 100 extremists were identified in the ranks of 3 million. And most of those were gang-related. So it was a made-up boogeyman to begin with.
You, Mr. Hegseth, are not the extremist. The people who would deny you your expression of faith are the extremists. They're the racists. They're the bigots. You're the one that is protecting their right to be one. Thank you for that. I want to go to another point in your opening statement. and it's summarized in this beautiful one-sentence paragraph. You said, quote, leaders at all levels will be held accountable, and warfighting and lethality and the readiness of the troops and their families will be our only focus. At that moment, in my mind's eye, I heard soldiers, airmen, Marines, sailors, guardians from the Pentagon to the Pacific and everywhere in between applaud. Applaud. And they're thinking, it's about time. I can get on board with that idea. And quite honestly, and I want to get to this because I think it's so important. I would say, I don't know, just about maybe everyone, I'm trying to think of an exception to this, that wears the uniform that has ever come before this committee or that I've met with privately, publicly, that I've been on tours with, that I've traveled with, that wear the uniform, whether it's with 4 stars or no stars, agrees with that statement. And I just want to caution you, and I'd be interested in your feedback on this. You know, there's been a lot of talk about firing woke generals, creating the purge group, and all those things you and I have talked about. I would say give those men and women a chance under new leadership. You know, my favorite painting in the rotunda is of George Washington retiring.
Paula, this is Senator Kramer
establishing
from
on
North
day one,
Dakota.
a man who could have been
Great
king,
state of North Dakota.
chose to be a civilian leader of this country.
Hunter, what's up, buddy?
And I just would
Good to see
encourage
you. Not under these circumstances. On these
to
circumstances,
trust them
but
first, and
always good to see you, man.
and look forward to them saluting the civilian leadership of this country. So just maybe if you could spend a minute just elaborating a little bit about the wokeness, where it comes from, and who will be held accountable.
The wokeness comes not from the uniform ranked, Senator, but from the political class. On day one, on January 20th, when President Trump is sworn in, he will issue a new set of lawful orders. And the leadership of our services will have an opportunity to follow those lawful orders or not. Those lawful orders will not be based on politics. They will be based on readiness, accountability, standards, and lethality. That is the process by which leaders will be judged. And accountability is coming because everybody in this room knows.
They're always so,
if you're a rifleman,
you know,
and you
ready
lose your
to
rifle,
throw out the
they're throwing the book at you.
the woke card.
But if you're
right?
a general
they play that card.
who loses a war,
But can they ever really
you get a promotion.
explain
That's not going to happen
or
in Donald Trump's
describe
Pentagon. There will be
just
real
what the hell
standards
they're talking about?
for success. Everyone from the top,
Pete
from
Hegseth
the
says,
most senior general to
"Oh,
the most lowly private,
We're going to focus
will
on
ensure
readiness
that they're treated fairly
in the
men and
military,
women inside that system.
as if
I also just want to
That
commend you
isn't
for
the number
your
one
answers to
priority
Senator Fisher's
of
questions
the
about
US
nuclear
military.
deterrence. But I also
As if that
appreciate the
hasn't
fact that
been
you emphasize
priority of the US
reputational
military
deterrence, because deterrence is not a weapon
since
system; it is
its
an attitude, and you
founding,
project an attitude of
since
deterrence.
its origination.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kramer. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hegseth, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Senator.
You've made several references to your religion today. I share that devotion to Christianity, but I must say I've been reminded somewhat of Saul on his way to Damascus. You seem to have been converted over the last several weeks and several months. You wrote in your book just last year that, but if we're going to, this is the book War on Warriors, but if we're going to send our boys to fight, and it should be boys, we need to unleash them to win. Later on, our boys should not fight by rules written by dignified men. Which is it? Is it only boys can fight? I mean, you've testified here today that you believe in women in combat, but you didn't just last year. How do you explain your conversion?
this is
Senator,
Senator King.
my
from
testimony
Maine.
is clear.
Independent
Writing a
from
book
Maine.
is different than being Secretary of Defense, and I look forward to leading the men and women of our military. And my comment there, Senator, was about the burdensome rules of engagement that members of our generation, men and women, have seen on the battlefield. And one thing President Trump changed in meaningful ways that led to meaningful developments on the battlefield. When President Trump took control in the first term, ISIS was raging across Iraq. And as someone who spent a lot of time there with other men and women who invested in that mission, it was a very difficult moment to see the black flag of ISIS fly. And what President Trump did was untie the hands of warfighters. He changed the rules of engagement, untied the hands of warfighters, and allowed them to complete their mission and crush ISIS. It has not just tactical implications, operational and strategic implications, how you allow warfighters to go about winning and fighting their wars. President Trump understands that, and within the laws of war and the Uniform Code of Military Justice, we are going to unleash warfighters to win wars so that wars don't drag on forever, as our generation has seen.
So are you rejecting Title 18 and Title 42, I think, also has provisions that incorporate the Geneva Convention and the laws of armed combat? Are you saying that those laws should be repealed? That is the law of the land right now.
Senator, we have laws on the books from the Geneva Conventions into the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and then underneath that you have layers in which standard or temporary rules of engagement are put into place. We fight enemies also, Senator, as our generation understands, that play by no rules. They use civilians as human shields.
So are you saying
they target
that
women and children?
The Geneva Convention should not be observed?
We follow rules. We follow rules, but we don't need burdensome rules of engagement that make it impossible for us to win these wars. And
You're
that's
saying
what
two different
President
things.
Trump
You're saying we follow
understands.
rules, but we don't have to follow the rules in all cases. Is that correct?
Senator,
you don't like burdensome rules.
Senator, I'm making an important tactical distinction that warfighters will understand. That there are the rules we swear an oath to defend, which are incredibly important, and this committee understands and helps set them. And then there are those echelons above reality, from corps to division to brigade to battalion, and by the time it trickles down to a company or a platoon or a squad level, you have a rules of engagement that nobody recognizes. And then it makes you incredibly difficult to actually do your job on the battlefield. That's the kind of assessment and look that an Army major will give to this process if I was confirmed to be the Secretary of Defense.
Your quote is,
Just really quick. My mind, whenever I hear this guy talk about unleashing war fighters and getting rid of the burdensome regulations of war, all I can think about are the numerous times in which our military and some of the guys who have completely lost it are, psychopaths, have went into, especially like during the years after when we were in Iraq, where they would go in and they would slaughter people in towns there. And I mean, I'm not going to say that I can see the future, but that there are some war fighters out there who are watching this and they are licking their chops. They want Pete Hegseth in there so bad so that they can just, I would say, the drinking is certainly a part of this, but also just that idea that they will be unleashed, that they can do as they please. And if we do go into the Panama Canal, if we do, which this is all just bullshit from Trump to distract us from what he's about to do with our taxes and the billionaire, bailouts that he's going to give to people, to his buddies. But imagine a world in which we do go to war and we have these war fighters unleashed and we are just brutally slaughtering people. And then think about what that does to America's role in the world and how dictators like Putin and Xi and Kim Jong-un will weaponize that against us. And it will just be this kind of snowball effect where, hey man, if the U.S. is just going to unleash these warriors, these war fighters, hey, why not? Why can't Putin do the same thing in Ukraine? Why can't Xi do the same thing? It's just the incompetency and the inability for Trump and these Republicans to play a long game strategy. That's pretty troubling. pretty embarrassing for our country.
True understanding
Your
of that.
quote in 2024, "Our boys should not fight by rules written by dignified men in mahogany rooms 80 years ago." That would be the Geneva Convention. America should fight by its own rules, and we should fight to win or not go in at all. Are you saying that the Geneva Convention provisions, which clearly outlaw torture of prisoners, should not apply in the future?
Senator, how we treat our wounded, how we treat our prisoners, the applications of the Geneva Conventions are incredibly important. But we would all have to acknowledge that the way we fought our wars back when the Geneva Conventions were written are a lot different than the asymmetric, non-conventional environment of counterinsurgency that I confronted in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was the senior counterinsurgency instructor in Afghanistan. My job was to understand how the Taliban and al-Qaeda operated so that NATO units coming in could be informed of what was happening. They knew our rules of engagement, and when they were more restrictive, they took advantage of them, and it put our men and women in a more dangerous and difficult place.
And you believe
For
that
future wars we fight, we need to have someone atop the Pentagon, sir, who understands how those ripple effects
Well, I just
impact
want to
the men and women
understand
in
your
uniform.
position. Your position is torture's okay. Is that correct? Waterboarding, torture is no longer prohibited given the circumstances of whatever war we're in. Is that correct?
Senator, that is not what I said. I've never been party to torture. We are a country that fights by the rule of law, and our men and women always do. And yet we have too many people here in air-conditioned offices that like to point fingers at the guys in dark and dangerous places, the gals in helicopters in enemy territory who are doing things that people in Washington, D.C. would never dare to do, or send, in many cases.
In one of your interviews, you said they're willing to do this. You're talking about Donald Trump and Senator Cruz. They're willing to do something like waterboarding if it's going to keep us safe. Are you okay with waterboarding?
Senator, the law of the land is that waterboarding is not legal.
So the statement that you made, you now recant. Is that correct? They are willing to do something like waterboarding if it's going to keep us safe. You expressed that with approval.
Senator, I'm very familiar with that as a concept, having spent a year at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, guarding 700 of those that attacked us on 9/11.
I just want to be clear. Are we going to abide by the Geneva Convention and the prohibitions on torture, or are we not? Is it going to
Senator,
depend
as
on
I've
the circumstances?
As I've stated multiple times, the Geneva Conventions are what we base ours. But what an American first national security policy is not going to do is hand its prerogatives over to international bodies that make decisions about how our men and women make decisions on the battlefield. America First understands we send Americans for a clear mission and a clear objective. We equip them properly for that objective.
All right,
We give them everything they need, and then we stand behind them with the rules of engagement that allow them to fight decisively to defeat America's enemies, which is why we say
I just have a few seconds left,
this
Mr. Hegseth, if you could. I was very disturbed in your opening statement where you talked about the priorities that you have. We will work with our partners and allies to deter aggression in the Indo-Pacific from the Communist Chinese. There's not a single mention in this statement about Ukraine or Russia. Is this code for we're going to abandon Ukraine?
Senator, the president, that's a presidential level policy decision. He's made it very clear that he would like to see a end to that conflict. We know who the aggressor is. We know who the good guy is. We'd like to see it as advantageous for the Ukrainians as possible, but that war needs to come to an end.
You talk a lot about deterrence of China. I would submit that Xi Jinping is watching what we do very carefully. If we abandon Ukraine, that would be the strongest signal possible to Xi Jinping that he can take Taiwan without significant resistance from this country.
Thank you, Senator King. Senator Scott of Florida.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter into the record 2 letters which testify to Mr. Hegseth's leadership record at Concerned Veterans for America.
Oh, dude,
the
I'm
first
not.
letter submitted by
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Darren
I can't.
Selnick,
I can't do.
Should have no
I can't
bearing
do Scott.
on.
I can't do Scott. What I do want to do is I want to check in on the Democrats had a House Democratic leadership had a press conference this morning. Let's see where we are here. There's so much going on. Looks like Mike Johnson also had a press conference. Yeah, that should be good. Let's see what else is happening here. Yeah, nice. Okay, so let's check out the House Democratic leadership.
In America,
Garcia,
we tend to pursue.
Lou. Let's see what we got. You could just tell by the way he comes to the microphone that he's just like, this is
Good morning.
This is going to be a long,
Grateful to be joined by
long Congress.
Representatives Ansari, Olszewski, and Rivas, new members to the 119th Congress, and so pleased to have them playing leadership roles here in the Congress, in the Democratic Caucus, and always joined by Vice Chair Ted Lieu as well. And we want to start by expressing our prayers from the entire Democratic Caucus to the people of Los Angeles County and Southern California for what they are going through today. I know the Vice Chair on this, and whose office has been affected by the destruction. But we're thinking about our friends and colleagues, coworkers and employees and loved ones out there. We saw this is going to take an unprecedented amount of rebuilding. People have lost everything. They've lost loved ones. They've lost their churches. They've lost heirlooms and wedding photos. The depth of this is so hard to comprehend. House Democrats are ready to be a resource that California needs to get back to a stronger position than where we were before. And we're prepared to work around the clock in a bipartisan way to make sure that we meet the needs of the public. Just a reminder that natural disasters and these events, they're not Republican disasters and Democratic disasters. These are disasters that have affected the entire country, and we will work together to ensure that we drive the resources necessary to help the rebuilding effort that Southern California needs. This is not a time for partisanship or division. It's a time to come together. I'll yield to Vice Chair Ted Lieu.
Thank you, Chairman Aguilar. And let me first say that my prayer is also with those affected by the fires. The northern part of my district was evacuated, but the two districts that are hit the hardest are Brad Sherman's and Judy Chu's. I'm going to give you an update on the fires and talk about three things. The first is, why did these fires explode and why are they so hard to contain? Second, what the response has been. And then third, some items to think about going forward. So in terms of what caused these fires to spread so quickly, we had a number of factors. There was drought-like conditions in Southern California for a number of months. We had very low humidity, and then the Santa Ana winds, this phenomenon of high winds, hit us. We've had Santa Ana winds in the past, but never at this scale, up to 100 miles per hour. So I want you to think about a hurricane with fire in it. And that's what a number of these communities experience. And these winds can blow these burning embers for miles and miles and miles that then set structures on fire. So overall, there's a lot of wildfires happening. There are two main ones, the Palisades fire, mostly in Brad Sherman's district, the Eden fire, mostly in Judy Chu's district. About 41,000 acres have burned. In D.C. itself is about 43,000 acres for perspective. Over 12,000 structures have been destroyed. At least 23 people confirmed dead. The response has been overwhelming. Over 15,000 personnel fighting these fires from multiple states and multiple countries, nearly 1,500 fire engines, over 80 aircraft, and FEMA's on site providing assistance to people who need disaster aid. So going forward, we have to
a lot of this
think
stuff
about
we've heard. I do want to come back and listen to them answer questions, but let's check back in on good old Pete. Okay, Elizabeth Warren is up. Fantastic. All right.
Certainly part of it.
Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to do this job? What drives you?
You have 30 seconds.
Because I love my country, Senator, and I've dedicated my life to the warfighters. People see me as someone who hosts a morning show on television. But people that really know me know where my heart's at. It's with the guys in this audience who've had my back, and I've had theirs.
The guys.
You've been in some of the darkest and most difficult places you can ever be in. You come back a different person.
Oh, man.
and only by the grace of God am I here before you today. I'm doing this job
Just the way he
for them,
Thank
for
you.
all of them.
Thank you,
for the
Mr.
president.
Hegseth.
is like rubbing
Senator
his
Warren.
hands there.
Thank you, Mr.
I'd
Chairman,
like to
and
see
Mr.
his
Hegseth.
tattoos.
Thank you.
I'd like to
Thank you
see
for
what
your
he's
service.
got tattooed on his
So
body.
if you're confirmed as Secretary of Defense, you will oversee our military, including about 250,000 women who currently serve on active duty in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Space Forces, and the Marines. And I have serious concerns that your behavior toward women disqualifies you from serving in this role. Now, I've been trying to get answers from you for quite some time on this. You haven't wanted to meet or to answer any of my questions, so we'll just have to do it here and dive in. I want to pick up on some of the questions asked by Senators Shaheen and Gillibrand and Hirono, and I just want to make sure we have a list of some of the facts that I think are undisputed. I'm not going to talk about anonymous sources. I'm just going to quote you directly. We've got the video. We've got it in print. So going back to January 2013, you told a Fox News interviewer that women in the military simply couldn't measure up to men in the military, saying that allowing women to serve in combat roles would force the military to lower the bar. You picked up on that same theme in 2015, making remarks on Fox News, referring to women in combat as, quote, it would erode standards. June 2024, you said on Ben Shapiro's podcast, quote, women shouldn't be in combat at all. And then, of course, we've talked about it in 2024. You published a book, and you say on page 26 of your book, we need moms, but not in the military, especially in combat units. Page 48 of your book, you claim that women should not be in combat roles because men are distracted by women. And then 10 weeks ago, you appeared on the Sean Ryan show and said, I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. Now, I presume you recall making all these statements?
Senator, I'm not familiar with the article you're pointing to in 2013, but it underscores my argument completely because in that 2013 argument, I was talking about standards.
No,
standards are what it's always been about,
Let's not
Senator.
have this same fight again.
Always been about Senate
I've quoted
standards.
you directly. We've got the video. We're happy to show it. But I want to be clear here. For 12 years, you were quite open about your views, and your views were consistently the same. Women are inferior soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and guardians. And in case anyone missed the point, and these are your words from 10 weeks ago, women absolutely straight up should not be permitted to serve in combat. And I notice on each of these quotes, those are said without qualification. It's not by how much you can lift or how fast you can run. They don't belong in combat, period, or your words, straight up. And then on November 9th, 2024, just 32 days after your last public comment saying that women absolutely should not be in combat, you declared that, quote, some of our greatest warriors are women, and you support having them serve in combat. Now, that is a very, very big about face in a very, very short period of time. So help me understand, Mr. Hegseth, what extraordinary event happened in that 32-day period that made you change the core values you had expressed for the preceding 12 years?
Senator, again, I very much appreciate you bringing up my comments from 2013 because for me, this issue has always been about standards. And unfortunately, because of some of the people that have been in political power for the last 4 years, priorities other than standards, lethality, and meritocracy have driven decision-making.
I'm quoting you from the podcast. Women shouldn't be in combat at all. Where is the reference to standards? That they should be there if they can carry, if they can run? I don't see that at all, Mr. Hegseth. What I see is that there's a 32-day period in which you suddenly have another description about your views of women in the military. And I just want to know, What changed in the 32 days that the song you sang is not the song you come in here today to sing?
Senator, the concerns I have and the concerns that many have had, especially in ground combat units, is that in pursuit of certain percentages or quotas, standards have been changed. And that makes the combat more difficult
Let me make a
for everybody
suggestion
involved.
about what happened in that 32 days. You got a nomination from President Trump. Now, I've heard of deathbed conversions, but this is the first time I've heard of a nomination conversion. And I hope you understand that many women serving in the military right now might think that if you can convert so rapidly your long-held and aggressively pursued views in just 32 days, that 32 days after you get confirmed, maybe you'll just reverse those views and go back to the old guy who said straight up, women do not belong in combat. Now, Mr. Hegseth, you have written
just really
that after...
quick, you know, man, the precedent this sets for our soldiers, right? So I talked about this a few minutes ago about how Pete Hegseth and talking about unleashing these warriors, what that will do to the mindset of some of these guys, how they'll just think that they're unleashed, they can do as they pleased, and that Hegseth, man, he's got their back. Now, just imagine what this is doing to soldiers who, you know, they do have women in their ranks. And, oh, well, you know, Pete says that they shouldn't be here. They'll tempt us. It's not good for us. So, you know, if I want to assault them, rape them, well, I mean, that's not really my fault. That's because those politicians at the top decided that women can be here with us men, us war fighters. And so, I shouldn't, there shouldn't be any consequences for me. Add on top of that what Republicans have done to women and their reproductive rights. I mean, if you're a woman in this country, I would be seething. I'd be incredibly angry, as you probably, a lot of you are.
They retire. Generals should be banned from working for the defense industry for 10 years. You and I agree on the corrosive effects of the revolving door between the Pentagon and defense contractors. It's something I would have liked to talk with you about if you'd come and been willing to visit with me. But the question I have for you on this is, will you put your money where your mouth is and agree that when you leave this job, you will not work for the defense industry for 10 years?
Senator, it's not even a question I've thought about because it's
think
not
about
one
it right
that,
now.
It's not one, my motivation for this job
I understand
has never
that. I
been
just
about
need
what
a
could
yes or no
conceivably
here.
come next.
Time is short. I just need a yes or no.
I would consult with the president about what the policy should be
In
at the Defense
other
Department.
words, you're quite sure that every general who serves should not go directly into the defense industry for 10 years, but you're not willing to make that same pledge?
I'm not a general, Senator.
You'll be the one, let us just be clear, in charge of the generals. So you're saying sauce for the goose, but certainly not sauce for the gander?
I would want to see what the policy of the president
Oh, I'll
is.
bet you would.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Senator Tuberville.
Those Republicans. Just,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your hard work and your committee's hard work, Mr. Chairman. This has gone well. I'd like to submit this letter.
You think this is going well, Tuberville?
At Vets for Freedom.
I bet you do.
I'd like to submit that for the record, please.
I bet you
Without
do.
objection.
General Hegseth, Mr. Hegseth, thanks for being here today and with your family. I know this is tough. That's what it's all about, though. You're a tough guy.
That's it right there.
Been here for a while.
That's it right there. The Republican Party is completely bought and sold by not only corporations, but these defense contractors. And so, of course, it's hilarious that, Elizabeth Warren, he's no general. He's he's overseeing all the generals. Oh, but well, he's not a general. These clowns.
Wow, never seen this many people that here for a support of a nominee. That's impressive. I met with a lot of them yesterday, and they are very passionate. So thank you for willing to take this on, and congratulations on your nomination. I'm worried about recruiting. I mean, we can look at everything out there and talk about all these things, these narratives, but at the end of the day, I came from a team sport where the players actually won the games. And that's what's going to happen here. You're not going to win the game. Now, you're going to set the precedent. You're going to get the blame or the credit, but there's going to be people that's going to be under you that's going to set the precedent for the future of our country. Now, the war games that we play on our...
You want to talk football? How coaches don't win games? You're an idiot, Tuberville.
Computers with our adversaries right now, for us, it don't look good because our military, we're in trouble. Our whole country's in trouble. Thank God President Trump got elected November the 5th. We couldn't kept down this same path. We could not, that could not happen. I met with a couple of generals this summer. Coach, we're spending more money on transgender restrooms than we are coverings for $100 million airplanes. That's not acceptable. We can't do that. That's not what this is about. Met with a couple of Navy SEALs not too long ago. They just got back from crawling around in the mud and the muck, overseas, unknown places. Couldn't tell you where they've been, carrying a weapon, obviously protecting us and our allies. And the first week they're back, what'd they do? They had to go through a week of DEI training. Both are now out. They give it up. It was embarrassing to them of what they had to do. We've lost all sight of what we're doing in our military.
Hold on. Is he saying that these Navy SEALs, they could go crawl around in the muck with a weapon, and they get back and they have to just go through some DEI training, and they couldn't do that, but they could endure being God knows where, fighting on behalf of America. Like, well, then that's a problem, right? That's a problem if we have SEALs who can't sit through a course, right? And they gave it up, which I don't even know. What is he talking about there? They gave it up. They gave up the course? They couldn't. They quit being a Navy SEAL because they had to go through a week, right? Are you sure, Tuberville, you want to talk about our Navy SEALs that way?
Lost all sight. It starts with leadership, and it starts with recruiting. Well, I'm a young man, used to when I was growing up, if you couldn't afford to go to college, you had the opportunity to go to the military where you could learn a trade. You could learn, you could make a living for your family, and eventually possibly get an education. That was a good alternative. We've forgotten that. We've forgotten it. We can't give up on our young people. Young people are our number one commodity in this country, and they're the ones that's going to live and die for the freedom of this country in the future. So, again, thank you for taking this on. Recruiting. Our service academies are meant to serve as our primary commissioning source of officers. It now appears that they are a breeding ground for leftist activists and champions of DEI and critical theory. Now, not all, but some. And some is way too much. How are we going to eliminate this, Mr. Hegseth? How are we going to get this back on track to where we grow our leaders? I had a young man that forever he wanted to go to West Point. I got him a nomination, I got him accepted, and he turned it down. He says, Coach, I'm not getting involved with that mess. How are we going to overcome this?
Senator, thank you for the question. And I think it comes down to leadership, clear leadership. From President Trump through me, should I be nominated? And that's what soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians see, is clear leadership. It says, this is what we believe. This is the mission we're going to give you. Here's the equipment we're going to give you, and here's how we're going to support you. Because the military, at a lot of levels, Senator, has been for generations a family business. You know, My grandfather served. My father served. I served. My daughter served. That chain has started to break, with generations of people my age and older talking to their kids and grandkids, wondering, pondering, do I want them to serve? Will my country use them responsibly? When that kind of doubt is cast, you get serious recruiting problems like we do right now. You get questions about whether I want my son or daughter to follow my path in West Point, which I've heard multiple times. Would I want my... And so you have to rip, root, and branch the politics and divisive policies out of these institutions and then focus them on creating and preparing actual future military leadership. West Point traditionally is focused on engineering, and rightfully so, because in our fighting forces across all services, we need the best and brightest minds in engineering, in addition to military studies. That's what I did at ROTC at Princeton, military science. And we need more uniformed members going back into West Point, the Air Force Academy, the Naval Academy, as a tour to teach with their wisdom of what they've learned in uniform, instead of just more civilian professors that came from the same left-wing woke universities that they left, and then try to push that into service academies. When that changes, Senator, I truly believe under Donald Trump, we will have a recruiting renaissance. That sends signals to the world, to our enemies and our allies alike, that America's back. And thankfully, then we have the men and women of our country willing to want to serve.
Thank you. And it's about attitude, too. And I love your attitude. You've got to be motivated. You've got to understand that people, they will hook up with you. They will understand and learn under their leaders. Why would you fight for a country that you don't love? That's what I keep hearing from a lot of our college kids that they're getting from these woke universities that they go to. Now, and I worked at a lot of them. That is one of the excuses I get from our kids. We've got to break that. Another one, according to the Pentagon, between 2001 and 2024, the number of civilian employees in the Office of the Secretary of Defense has nearly doubled from 1,500 to 3,000. Civilians on Joint Chiefs has increased from 191 to almost 1,000. Our military end strength goes down. Our staff numbers are exploding. What are you going to do about that?
Senator, we're going to address that. We won World War II with 7 four-star generals. Today, we have 44 four-star generals. There's an inverse relationship between the size of staffs and victory on the battlefield. We don't need more bureaucracy at the top. We need more warfighters empowered at the bottom. So it's going to be my job working with those that we hire and those inside the administration to identify those places where fat can be cut so it can go toward lethality.
Thank you, Senator Tuberville. Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hegseth, welcome to this committee.
Thank you.
You know, we have far too much partisanship in our country right now. I think it's eating away at the fabric of what has always made this country great, about bringing people together from all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of experiences. And we know that in our motto, together as one, we are strong. And so we in this committee, and certainly I speak for myself, but I think I speak for many of my colleagues, want to take partisanship out of this proceeding as much as we can. I'm not naive. It's out there. I get it. But we've got to try to take that out. And I want you to know that as a member of this committee, I have voted in a bipartisan way for secretaries of defense. I voted for 2 secretaries of defense when Donald Trump was previously president. We had those 2. We had, I think, 5 total secretaries of defense during that 4-year period. So we want to keep that in mind as to what we might see in this coming administration. But I voted, and we voted by a big margin for those folks as well. But part of that was the process and having an opportunity to get to know the person and understand their qualifications and understand the standards. You know, I made repeated requests to meet with you prior to this meeting. I know many of my other colleagues also wanted to meet with you. I did that with the other nominees that I was happy to vote for. I thought they were highly qualified individuals and true professionals. And yet I could never get a meeting with you. Was there a reason you were afraid to have one-on-one meetings with some of my colleagues before the hearing?
Senator, I know there was a great deal of outreach to multiple offices. Schedules get full. There's a lot going on.
I was ready.
And I welcome the opportunity,
I was
pending
ready.
my schedule, to have an opportunity to sit down.
I was ready. It would have been so much better to have that opportunity to talk beforehand. I think that's a big mistake, and it doesn't set us on a good course when you refuse to meet with people and have a professional conversation about the huge challenges that we face at the Department of Defense. My colleagues, the folks who introduced you and others, the chairman has mentioned about the management of the DoD as a concern, cost overruns, delays on weapon systems. We need strong management at the Department of Defense, first and foremost. We've got to have someone who's going to grab the reins and give the taxpayers value for having the most lethal fighting force in the world that defends freedoms, but we've got to do it in an efficient way. I've heard about the jobs you've had in the past. Let's just talk about qualifications. I know you had 2 previous positions. How many people reported to you in those positions?
Senator, at Vets for Freedom, we were a small upstart. Our focus was
just the number,
working
please.
on Capitol Hill, going back to the battlefield
Just
to
the
support
number.
warfighters.
Just the number, please.
We probably had 8 to 10 full-time staff and lots of volunteers.
So you had 8. Has there been any other? We've heard about the 2, and certainly there's been a lot of talk about the mismanagement, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just curious. I won't go into that. Just curious. So you had 8 there. What's the largest number of people you've ever supervised or had in an organization in your career?
Not 3 million. Senator.
No, I don't expect that. Very few people have ever had that experience, but how many? It's a straight up question.
I think we had over 100 full-time staff at Concerned Vets for America, roughly, with thousands of volunteers.
So 100 people.
I was also a headquarters company commander, which would have been
that's fine.
a couple of hundred.
Couple.
Nothing remotely near the size of the Defense Department,
Right.
I would acknowledge that.
Actually,
Senator.
not remotely near even a medium-sized company in America, let alone a big company in America, especially a major corporation. And we're hiring you to be the CEO of one of the most complex, largest organizations in the world. We're the board of directors here. I don't know of any corporate board of directors that would hire a CEO for a major company if they came and said, I supervised 100 people before. They'd ask you, well, what kind of experiences you had? We need innovation. Can you give me an experience or your actual experience of driving innovation in an organization? Give me an example of where you have done that.
Oh my goodness, Senator, absolutely. At Concerned Veterans for America, we created the Fixing Veterans Healthcare Task Force, a bipartisan task force that never been done before, to create policy, to drive policy change on Capitol Hill that organizations fought ferociously against. We got the VA Accountability Act passed and the Mission Act passed in a way that a nonprofit of our size, veterans organization, has never done. And that's testified in all the letters that we put forward to the committee, which are on the record.
I have limited time. Thank you for that. Give me an example of where you've driven down cost. I've heard the examples that Senator Blumenthal gave. The cost was a real problem for you in your 50-person organization that you actually raised a lot less than what you actually spent. Did you drive costs down? If in a 50-person organization, let me tell you, we've got to drive costs down dramatically in an organization of 3 million people and hundreds of billions of dollars. You don't have that experience that you can talk about. To me, this is, or acquisition reform. Acquisition reform, you bring that up. Have you had experience in acquisition reform?
I've written about and studied on acquisition reform.
Have you
for quite
actually
some
done
time,
it?
Because what we need in the hands of our warfighters better change, because we're not doing it well right now.
It better, and we need people who have experience actually doing that. You talk about standards. Again, I'm going to go back to CEO of the most complex organization in the world. I don't think there's a board of directors in America that would hire you as a CEO with the kind of experience you have on your resume. You talk about standards. You talk about raising or lower, that we have a problem of standards in the DoD, and we have to raise standards for the men and women who serve. Do you think that the way to raise the minimum standards of the people who serve us is to lower the standards for the Secretary of Defense, that we have someone who has never managed an organization more than 100 people is going to come in and manage this incredibly important organization and do it with the professionalism and has no experience that they can tell us that they have actually done that? I have real problems with that. This is not about other issues that are brought up. They're all very important. I'm just about trying to get things done, managing efficiently, and having the best people who have demonstrated that in a large organization. And I'm sorry, but I don't see that in your background. There are a lot of other things you can do very well. You're a capable person, but I'm not you have not convinced me that you're able to take on this tremendous responsibility with a complex organization and having little or no significant management experience.
Senator, I'm grateful to be hired by one of the most successful CEOs in American history, should I be confirmed.
Mr. Hegseth, it seems to me that you've supervised far more people than the average United States senator supervises typically. And
except for former governors, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Mullen, I understand you are yielding back your time and do not wish to ask questions. I was misinformed. Senator Mullen,
okay.
it's right.
Caught me totally off guard there. I'd like to submit for the record signatures by 32 members of the House of Representatives who are veterans. The signatures call on the Senate to honor the constitutional duty of advise and consent by conducting a fair, thorough confirmation process that evaluates his nomination solely on the substance and merits. His distinguished military service, academic credentials, and a bold vision for revitalizing the national defense. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record.
Without objection.
You know, there's a lot of talk going about talking about qualifications and then about us hiring him if we are the board. But there's a lot of senators here I wouldn't have on my board because there is no qualifications except your age, and you got to be living in the state and you're a citizen of the United States to be a senator. Other than the fact we got to convince a lot of people to vote for us. And then when we start talking about qualifications, for if you're qualified for it. Could the chairman tell me what the qualifications are for the Secretary of Defense? Mr. Chairman, could you tell me what the qualifications are for the Secretary of Defense?
I'd be happy
I'll read
for
it.
you to do that.
Yeah. Let me read it for you because I Googled
I
it.
was getting some advice from my second in command.
Yeah, but I'm just making a point because there's a lot about qualifications, and I think it's so hypocritical of senators, especially on the other side of the aisle, be talking about his qualifications, not going to lead the secretary or be the Secretary of Defense, and yet your qualifications aren't any better. You guys aren't any more qualified to be the senator than I'm qualified to be the senator, except we're lucky enough to be here. But let me read you what the qualifications of the Secretary of Defense is, because I Googled it, and went through a lot of different sites, and really it's hard to see. But in general, the U.S. Secretary of Defense position is filled by a civilian. That's it. If you have served in the U.S. Army Forces and have been in the service for, you have to be retired for at least 7 years, and Congress can weigh that. And then there's questions that the senator from Massachusetts brought up about serving on a board inside the military industry, and yet your own secretary that you all voted for, Secretary of Austin, we had to vote on a waiver because he stepped off the board of Raytheon. But I guess.
Let me turn my mic on. Okay. I just so this is one of the biggest clowns in the Senate, this Mullen guy. He's super confrontational. He is clearly should not be a senator. He's pointing fingers at other senators, talking all this nonsense, trying to run around in circles with his logic here. But I want to talk about the laughing in this room. And I want to talk about the two recent terrorist attacks in New Orleans and in Las Vegas, where two former military servicemen lost their lives and killed people because they don't feel as though the politicians and Trump are going to do the right thing. And it's just mind-boggling that this Republican Party can sit there and pretend as though they're the ones who are going to protect our servicemen. They're the party of the U.S. military, and the Democrats don't know shit. And they're laughing They're laughing when they're confirming one of the most disgraceful, unqualified people to lead those servicemen. That's why you have people decide to take those extreme actions, because they feel as though their lives are a joke. Mullen, Tuberville, all of these Republican senators who are making it clear as day that they don't give a damn about those Navy SEALs that Tuberville talked about, crawling around in the muck overseas. Now, he's going to talk about them in a confirmation hearing if he can use them. But really, I mean, when there's talk about how a qualified person should be leading them, it's one big joke.
That's okay because that's a Democrat Secretary of Defense. But you so quickly forget about that. And then Senator Kaine, or I guess I better use the senator from Virginia, starts bringing up the fact that what if you showed up drunk to your job? How many senators have showed up drunk to vote at night? Have any of you guys asked them to step down and resign from their job? And don't tell me you haven't seen it, because I know you have. And then how many senators do you know have got a divorce before cheating on their wives? Did you ask them to step down? No. But it's for show. You guys make sure you make a big show and point out the hypocrisy because the man's made a mistake. And you want to sit there and say that he's not qualified? Give me a joke. I mean, it is so ridiculous that you guys hold yourself as this higher standard and you forget you got a big plank in your eye. We've all made mistakes. I've made mistakes. And Jennifer, thank you for loving him through that mistake. Because the only reason why I'm here and not in prison is because my wife loved me too.
What?
I have changed, but I'm not perfect.
What?
But I found somebody that thought I was perfect. And for whatever reason, you love Pete, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
But just like our Lord and Savior forgave me, my wife's had to forgive me more than once too, and I'm sure you've had to forgive him too. And so thank you. So before I go down this rabbit hole again, tell me something about your wife that you love.
She's the smartest, most capable, loving, humble, honest person I've ever met. In addition to being incredibly beautiful.
Yeah, dude, try to give us something like specific, man. You know what I mean? Like, try to let's not hear a canned response. The sociopathic canned response. Man, she's great. She's great, dude. No, man. I'm not buying it.
Well, she's also the mother.
Oh, an amazing mother.
Yes.
Of our blended family of 7 kids.
Brother, I'm pulling you along. I'm trying to help you here. Do you believe that you're going to be running the Secretary or the Department of Defense by yourself?
Senator, absolutely not. Just as President Trump is assembling his cabinet, I look forward and already am in the process of building one of the best possible teams you can imagine, with decades and decades of experience outside of the Pentagon, driving innovation and excellence, and also inside the building, knowing how to make it happen. Yes, sir.
So in your organizations that you did have the privilege of running, did you have a board that you...
In both organizations, we had a board, yes.
Okay, and what did you do with that board? What kind of decisions did you make with them?
Those boards provided oversight and insight into decision-making.
They all have special, unique sets that maybe filled gaps that you're not the expertise in?
Yes, sir.
So do you believe you're capable of surrounding yourself with capable individuals that you're going to be able to run those same ideas by, and surround yourself with people that are smarter and better equipped in maybe areas that you don't necessarily carry those expertise with?
Senator, the only reason I've had success in life, to include my wonderful wife, is because of people more capable around me and having the self-confidence to empower them and say, hey, run with the ball, run with the football, take it down the field. We'll do this together. I don't care who gets the credit. And in this case, that's how the Pentagon will be run.
Let's end with this, Mr. Chairman, about the qualifications. You got a man who has literally put his butt on the line, who served 20 years in the service, multiple deployments, has heard the bullets crack over the top of his head, has been willing to go into combat, been willing to see friends die for this country. And he's willing to still put himself through this. His wife is willing to still stand beside him, knowing he wasn't perfect, knowing that all this was going to be brought up, and he's still willing to serve the country. What other qualifications does he need? That I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Mullen. Senator Duckworth. And again, we really are going to strictly enforce the rule about no demonstrations or noise. The distinguished ranking member.
Just a point of personal privilege to make a correction. The reason that General Austin required a waiver was not because of his participation in a corporate enterprise. It was because he did not have 7 years of interruption between his service and his appointment. Second point is that if any of us were appointed as Secretary of Defense, we would be subject to the same types of questions. And the case in point is Senator John Tower was nominated for Secretary of Defense. It was discovered by his colleagues that his behavior was not commensurate with the responsibilities despite his service, and he was voted down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Duckworth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And also, Secretary Mattis had to have this waiver as well. Mr. Hegseth, this hearing is about whether you are qualified to be Secretary of Defense, and one of the qualifications, to answer my colleague's question, is to actually win the votes of every member of this committee and to be confirmed by the United States Senate. And you need to convince us that you're worthy of that vote, because the people of the state of Illinois voted for me to be their senator so that I could cast that vote when it comes to picking who is going to be the next Secretary of Defense. This hearing now seems to be a hearing about whether or not women are qualified to serve in combat, and not about whether or not you are qualified to be Secretary of Defense. And let me just say that the American people need a SecDef who's ready to lead on day one. You are not that person. Our adversaries watch closely during times of transition, and any sense that the Department of Defense that keeps us safe is being steered by someone who's wholly unprepared for the job puts America at risk, and I am not willing to do that. With that in mind, Mr. Hegseth, I want you to try to explain to the American people, this committee, who have to vote for you, and to our troops who are deployed around the world, why you are qualified to lead the Department of Defense. We already know that you've only led the largest, a 200-person organization. We already know that you so badly mangled a budget that after you left, they had to bring in a forensic accountant to figure out what went wrong, and that the largest budget you ever managed was about $18 billion. You know, that is about 51,560 times lower than the Department of Defense budget of $825 billion. $16 million is 51,568 times smaller than the defense budget. Please describe to me, Mr. Hegseth, you talk about DOD passing an audit. Please describe to me a time or an organization when that you led underwent an audit, because you say you're going to hire smarter people than you to run this audit. I'm not asking you to be an accountant. I want you to be able to tell me what kind of guidance will be given to those employees, what will happen whether or not you pass that audit. Have you led an audit of any organization, yes or no? I don't want a long answer, yes or no. Have you led an audit of any organization of which you were in charge?
Senator, in both of the organizations I ran, we were always completely fiscally responsible.
Yes or no, did you lead an audit?
And the way my leadership
yes or no,
has
did you lead an
been
audit?
stated
Yes or
has
no?
been completely
What are you afraid of? You
mischaracterized.
can't answer this question. Yes or no, did you lead an audit? Do you not know this answer?
Senator, every
Yes or
part
no?
of my leadership
Yes
of these
or no?
organizations
Yes
has
or
been
no, did you lead an audit?
misrepresented
I will
from
take
top
that as
to
a no.
bottom.
What were the findings? So there were no findings because you've never led an audit. What guidance did you give the auditors? None, because you've never led an audit. Nobody expects you to be an accountant, Mr. Hegseth. What we expect is for you to understand the complexity of this Pentagon budget process that is absolutely necessary to outfit our warfighters.
Look, the Secretary of Defense is required to make quick decisions every single day with high-level information that's being provided for them. A Secretary of Defense has to have breadth and depth of knowledge. Right now, I am concerned that you have neither. Mr. Hegseth, what is the highest level of international negotiations that you have engaged in, that you have led in? Because the Secretary of Defense does lead international security negotiations. There are three main ones that the Secretary of Defense leads and signs. Can you name at least one of them?
Could you repeat the question, Senator?
Sure. What is the highest level of international security agreement that you have led? And
I didn't know I was going to have to do
some
that.
that the Secretary of Defense would lead. There's three main ones.
I thought I was just going to be able to unleash
I
the
have
war
not been
fighters.
involved in international security arrangements because I have not been in government other
Okay.
than serving in the military. So my job has been
So
to
no, the
lead
answer is no.
men
Can
and
you
women
name
in
one of the
combat.
three main ones that the
You're
Secretary
talking
of
about
Defense
defense
signs?
arrangements. I mean, NATO might be one that you're referring to.
Status of Forces Agreement would be one of them.
Status of Forces Agreement. I've been a part of teaching about Status of Forces Agreements.
But you don't
inside
remember to mention
Afghanistan.
it? You're not qualified, Mr. Hegseth. You're not qualified. You talk about repairing our defense industrial complex. You're not qualified to that. You could do acquisition and cross-servicing agreements, which essentially are security agreements. You can't even mention that. You've done none of those. You talked about the Indo-Pacific a little bit, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. Can you name the importance of at least one of the nations in the ASEAN, and what type of agreement we have with at least one of those nations? And how many nations are in ASEAN, by the way?
I couldn't tell you the exact
No, you
amount of
couldn't,
nations
because
in
you've
that,
not
but I
even
know we have
bothered to
allies
do-
in South Korea and Japan and in AUKUS with Australia, trying to work
Okay.
on submarines with them. and
Mr.
data
Hegseth,
transfers
none
with
of those
them.
countries
We
are
have
in
allies
ASEAN.
across.
None of those three countries that you've mentioned are in ASEAN. I suggest you do a little homework before you prepare for these types of negotiations. Listen, Mr. Hegseth, we ask our troops to go into harm's way all the time. We ask them to go into harm's way. And this behind me is a copy of the Soldier's Creed, a copy that usually hangs over my desk here in the Senate, and you should be familiar with it. It's the same copy that hung over my desk at Walter Reed every single day that I woke up and fought my way back because I wanted to go back and serve next to my buddies who'd saved my life. This same copy, these words are repeated over and over and over again. And let me read out two things to you, two sentences. I will always place the mission first, and I am disciplined, physically and mentally tough, trained and proficient in my warrior task. Mr. Hegseth, our troops follow these words every single day, and they man up and they pack their rucksacks and they go to war. And they deserve a leader who can lead them, not a leader who wants to lower the standards for himself or raising the standards for other people. And by the way, our troops already meet the standards. We ask troops to man that ship, fight that fire, fly that helicopter until their very last breath. And they do that every single day. They cannot be led by someone who's not competent to do the job. How can we ask these warriors to train and perform the absolute highest standards when you are asking us to lower the standards to make you the Secretary of Defense simply because you are buddies with our president-elect? And by the way, he has filed for bankruptcy 6 times. I'm not quite sure he's the kind of CEO you want to refer to as a successful businessman. Let me make it clear. You can't seem to grasp that there is no U.S. military as we know it without the incredible women that we serve. Women who've earned their place in their units. You have not earned your place as Secretary of Defense. You say you care about keeping our armed forces strong and that you like that our armed forces are meritocracy, then let's not lower the standards for you. You, sir, are a no-go at this station.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth. I would like to submit for the record a letter submitted by Mr. Brian Marriott that says anyone who would claim that Pete mismanaged funds at Vets for Freedom is ignorant of the facts. Without objection, it will be admitted to the record. Senator Budd.
That was intense.
Thank you, Chairman Wicker, and congrats on your chairmanship of this committee. I want to thank you for your leadership and your handling of this today. I think you're doing a great job. So I want to also submit for the record a letter.
Pleiades Wilson,
submitted by
thanks for
Mr.
subscribing.
Catlin, the former
If you guys haven't
operations manager
subscribed
of Vets for
to
Freedom.
the channel yet, be sure to do that.
Catlin's letter
I'm also
states that
trying to
Mr.
figure
Hegseth
out
and
how to
Mr.
get
Catlin
these
conducted
Facebook
weekly
comments
meetings
to show up on the screen
meticulously
as
review
well as
every
the
dollar
YouTube
that the
comments, because there's a
organization
great
Pete's hands-on approach and
chat
dedication to
community
financial
over on
responsibility
Facebook as
ensured
well.
that Vets for Freedom operated within its
Jeffrey
budget.
Davis, thanks for liking the stream. Be sure to hit that
Mr.
like
Catlin's
button, guys.
letters also states that Pete
to help
treated his
spread
staff with the
the
utmost
stream.
respect, regardless of race or gender. So I ask unanimous consent to enter this into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. Mr. Hegseth, congratulations on your nomination. Thanks for appearing before the committee today. I enjoyed meeting you in my office before Christmas, and I've enjoyed our friendship before that. You know, you stated in your advanced policy questions that the American people need to be informed, engaged, and inspired to join our military. I wholeheartedly agree with that. We also have a problem, though, with obesity and falling academic standards. It's very concerning. We've talked about that before. So if confirmed, how would you approach increasing the number of Americans eligible to serve in the military, but without lowering standards?
Well, Senator, I think there are already, to the credit of, I believe, the Army and other services have now caught up to that, which have piloted programs that have had some success, that have allowed young Americans who want to serve in the military but can't necessarily pass the ASVAB or pass the APFT to get into basic training, an opportunity to get caught up, a preparatory class. Sure. Unfortunately, yes, we do have a problem of obesity in our country, not necessarily something that the, if I'm confirmed, Secretary of Defense is able to address. But I do think leading from the front matters. I do think having a Secretary of Defense that will go out and do PT with the troops matters, that has been out there and done that before. And hopefully that's a motivating factor for young people. But the reality of obesity and criminal backgrounds and medical problems have long been an issue of recruitment in America, unfortunately. What changed is the perception of military service because of the condition of the services, and frankly, because of, in some ways, the way our schools don't teach young people to love the country anymore. And if you don't love the country, why do you want to serve that country? That's a deeper problem. But all of those things need to be addressed to revive recruiting, and obesity is certainly a part of it.
Thank you for that. So I've had multiple conversations with young folks back in North Carolina, young men, young women, and we get to meet a lot of them. But, you know, I hear from some of these folks who I encourage to join the military. They say that they're concerned that it's become politicized. And if confirmed, would you commit to working with my office to address the military recruiting crisis and ensuring the military is focused on warfighting?
Senator, absolutely. Number one, from day one, with a mandate from the Commander-in-Chief, who received that mandate when Americans spoke out loudly and said, we want peace through strength, we want America first foreign policy, and we don't want political ideology driving decisions inside our Defense Department. That was clear. It's an infection that the American people are acutely aware of, which the men and women in this room have lived firsthand. I've lived it firsthand. And that's why it will be a priority. And I truly believe, and I'm humbled by this, the response we've already seen from young men and women who've decided to join the military when they had said, I wasn't going to. But seeing a Commander-in-Chief, Donald Trump, reassured them. Seeing the possibility, if confirmed, of a Secretary of Defense that would have their back reassured them. And so in the first couple of months after President Trump's election, we have already seen, the numbers are there, a recruiting surge in all the services that I would welcome the opportunity to continue. And it's humbling to think that families across this country would have confidence in us to deliver for their young men and women. There's no more important task.
Thank you for that. So shifting gears a bit, I want to hear some of your thoughts on the growing fighter aircraft capacity gap with China and what this means for a potential fight in the Indo-Pacific. So if confirmed,
Senator Reid for a unanimous
We're
consent.
skipping forward. I'm not.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask unanimous consent that 2 letters be submitted for the record. One letter is signed by numerous
I'm not doing,
organizations, including the Government Accountability
Republican
Project. The
talking
other
points.
signed by several organizations, including the Truman National Security Project.
Without objection, so ordered. Now, Senator Kelly, Senator Rosen got here after the gavel went down. Do you really want to go ahead of her?
I am going to defer to my good friend and colleague, Senator Rosen,
That
from
is
the
a really
great
good,
state of Nevada.
Really good decision. Senator Rosen, you are recognized.
And thank you, Senator Kelly. I owe you one. Thank you, Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Reed, for holding this hearing. And Mr. Hegseth, I appreciate your service and your willingness to serve again. However, I am deeply disappointed that you would not agree to meet with me, as other members have said on this committee prior to this hearing, as is the precedent for this committee and others. So let me tell you a little bit about what I would have talked about had you made yourself available prior to the hearing. Nevada is home to the premier aviation training ranges for both the Air Force and the Navy, the largest ammunition depot in the world, and the only place in the country where we are able to verify the reliability of our nuclear stockpile without the need for explosive testing. The Nevada National Guard is one of the only few units across the country with the mission of fighting wildfires. That's for another hearing. And currently activated to fight the devastating fires around Los Angeles in support of our neighbors. We therefore play a critical role in our national security, and the person who holds the position of Secretary of Defense matters greatly to Nevada service members and our military equities. But every single person who serves in the military, we've talked about, my colleagues, esteemed colleagues, have talked about recruitment and retention. One day, they will become a veteran. So my veterans and the folks who are serving active duty now are concerned about what you think. DOD does not have jurisdiction over Nevada's 200,000 plus veterans, but I am interested in your views about the service members once they've transitioned out of the military, given the influence you would have while they're in service if confirmed. In 2019, on a segment of Fox and Friends, you said that veteran service organizations, VSOs, I'm going to quote, encourage veterans to apply for every government benefit they can ever get after they leave the service. You stated you don't want to, quote, be dependent on government assistance from the VA based on injuries or illnesses that might have arisen from your military service. So I'm just going to ask you a few yes or no questions about veterans, understanding you don't have jurisdiction, but this is important to our morale, it's important to our recruitment, and is important to our retention, and it is important to how we respect others in this country. So yes or no, please, do you believe that VSOs are wrong to support veterans in obtaining the benefits that they have rightfully earned and deserved when they signed that line like you did for your service?
Senator,
yes or
veterans
no, please?
deserve the benefits they've earned. I have been in many battles with traditional veteran service organizations over differences of opinion about how to deliver those services,
yes or
including
no?
Veterans
Do you believe
Choice,
VSOs are wrong?
Which is VSOs is a very broad term. We were a VSO also, ma'am. But some of those services took a traditionally
should they be able to help
approach.
the veterans obtain the benefits that they have earned? Yes or no? Should anyone be able to help?
Every veteran should have rapid access to all the benefits that they've earned.
Do you believe that veterans should be ashamed for
Absolutely.
having sought and obtained the benefits that they have earned? Do you think veterans should be ashamed to seek out benefits?
Senator, I think
Yes or
we
no?
should be ashamed as a nation of the amount of veterans that commit
You think
suicide
veterans
because they hit a brick
should be
wall.
ashamed
They
because-
commit suicide because
This is
they
not
hit
the
a brick
question,
wall
sir.
of the
I'm going to
bureaucracy
move
of
on.
the
I'm going to
VA,
take that
and
as a
reformers
yes.
are not courage enough.
How about veterans who suffer lasting
Take it on.
injuries or illnesses due to their military service? Do you think they deserve our support and assistance? I mean, your answers to these, they're too broad. People want to know, are you willing to support our veterans organizations that will help our veterans get every damn thing that they deserve because they signed on the dotted line to keep us safe, just like you did? I respect that. Will you?
Senator, with all due humility, I don't know that there's anyone in this room over the last 20 years that have worked harder to ensure that our veterans are taken care of. It has
So
been
do
a
you think
passion of
veterans are
my life,
dependent on the-
alongside with so many on this dais, to make sure that veterans receive, and it is a recruiting crisis.
But you said
when
that
veterans
veterans
are
are
not treated
dependent
well,
on the government.
they don't
You
want
said
their
veterans are
sons and daughters
dependent
to
on the
join.
government. Do you believe that veterans getting these benefits are dependent on the government? Or do you believe it's a benefit they've earned and deserved through their service?
It's a
Are they
benefit they've
dependent?
earned and a
Then-
hand up to
But
the
these are
next
your
chapter of their
words then.
life.
So you have again
Absolutely.
changed your position. Where you believe the veterans are dependent, now you believe they've earned and deserved it. I just think it's disrespectful to change that position. These are benefits that people may need throughout their life and may not know when they need them or how they're going to need them, and they need to be there when they do. Thank you. I'm going to move on to my next question. America's role in the world. Our alliances, the threats America's facing, they're serious, they're wide-ranging, from China to Russia to Iranian-backed terrorism. So do you agree with the National Defense Strategy that the U.S. cannot compete with China, Russia, and their partners alone, and certainly cannot win a war that way? And this is a quote from the National Defense Strategy. Is your interpretation that American first foreign policy is America alone? Does that include abandoning our allies and partners such as NATO, Taiwan, Israel, and others? And if we can't win alone and we don't strengthen our strategic partnerships, I would say that position, your position, places on a strategic path to lose to our adversaries. So maybe you're okay with choosing that path for America. I want to know how you square that position with the positions you articulated in your book, where you wrote that NATO is at relic, at best a distraction, and should be scrapped and remade. Are you okay with sending us down a path where we can't win?
Senator, the world has had, our friends in the world have had no better ally. Our allies and partners have had no better friend than President Donald Trump, who's reinvigorated a NATO alliance, who's stood behind Israel in every way, in ways this administration has not. He has ensured that the NATO alliance has become far more robust. He worked with allies in the Pacific as well.
Is Donald Trump going to stand behind Ukraine? Are you going to stand behind Ukraine? You say he's the strongest president. President-elect Trump said he will end the war in Ukraine before he takes office. Okay, so less than a week before he's inaugurated, to the best of your knowledge. Do you have knowledge of a plan that he's going to use to rapidly end the war with Ukraine? Do you believe it's feasible, that it does not make unacceptable concessions to Vladimir Putin, who is a brutal dictator? And are you going to give President-elect Trump the military advice that you have given others to achieve the objective of us winning the war in Ukraine? How do you think a rapid end to the war that Vladimir Putin started will affect the United States standing across the world?
Senator, I will always give clear guidance, my clear guidance, best guidance to the President of the United States on matters like that.
Do you think that if we concede to Vladimir Putin that will hurt our credibility with our allies and partners? And do you not believe that our adversaries are watching?
Perhaps you can take that for the record, Mr. Hegseth. Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to submit for the record a letter submitted by Mr. Christopher Ahn, the former Director of Operations for Vets for Freedom. Mr. Ahn, his letter states that the suggestion, quote, the suggestion that funds were misused for personal gain, lavish parties, or other improper purposes is categorically false. Throughout my time working with Pete Hegseth, he consistently demonstrated exceptional integrity and leadership. I asked unanimous consent to enter this letter into the record.
Without objection, so ordered. Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hegseth, good to see you here today. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Senator.
And your willingness to serve. I also want to thank you for your clarity in articulating the vision you have for the Department of Defense in restoring an ethos, a warrior ethos. Which is in stark contrast to the ethos we've seen the last 4 years, which is of weakness and wokeness. And I want to drill down on a few things specifically and exactly how we've gotten to where we've gotten with recruiting and morale. DEI. There's been a little bit of discussion about this, but for those watching at home, DEI is not about giving everybody opportunity. It is rooted in cultural Marxism. The idea that you pit the room, any room, with oppressor versus oppressed. It's race essentialism, and it is poison. It has no business whatsoever in our military. I think the American people have spoken loudly and clearly about this. They're tired of this. They're tired of woke ideology. And to my Democrat colleagues on the other side, if you haven't picked up on that, you missed the plot. Because that's what November 5th partially was about. And so let's talk specifically about some of these DEI programs that have been funded. In our academies, specifically the Air Force Academy, it was advised as disfavored language to refer to your mom and dad as mom and dad. Okay? Dear mom and dad, I'm writing home. Don't say that. That's insane. We're all just people. You can't say that either. And in an effort to police this, in a 1984 Orwellian novel, there was actually an eyes and ears program to rat on your fellow students who might say mom and dad. Or just say, in a tough situation, you know what, we're all just people, can't say that. This wasn't limited, by the way, to our academies. the Secretary of the Air Force, our current Secretary of the Air Force, in a memo from August of 2022, thought we had too many white officers, advocated for quotas. And if you crunch the numbers, that meant that 5,800 white officers who've worked really hard should be fired. In the United States of America, I don't know how we got here. And by the way, the Air Force isn't alone here. The Navy sort of touted a drag queen influencer. This stuff is insane. And people wonder why recruiting has dropped off. And let me just go through a few numbers, then I want to get your comments on how we fix this, because it's gone completely off the rails. In 2022, the Army missed their recruiting goal of 60,000 soldiers by over 15,000. In 2023, the Navy missed their recruiting goals by over 7,000. In 2022, the Air Force couldn't meet their standards, their numbers, even though they lowered their standards. They've lowered their standards to meet numbers they still can't get to. Mr. Hegseth, we got to fix this. I think what you've demonstrated today is that you have the talent and the ability and the desire to fix it. How are you going to fix it?
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. First and foremost, up front, you have to tear out DEI and CRT initiatives, root and branch out of institutions.
100%.
And then you have to put in Army, Navy, and Air Force secretaries and others, civilian positions at the helm, who are committed to the same priorities that the President of the United States is, and if confirmed, the Secretary of Defense will be. Send a clear message that this is not a time for equity. Equity is a very different word than equality. Equality is the bedrock of our military. Men and women, duty positions in uniform, black, white, doesn't matter. We treat you equally based on who you are in the image of God as an individual. And we all get the same bad haircuts. You're not an individual, you're part of a group. Equity prescribes some sort of an outcome based on differing attributes that we have that divide us. What skin color are you? What gender are you? And then infuse that into institutions which manifest in things like quotas, formal or informal, which does what to morale? Sends it in the tubes. And it makes people feel like they're being judged by something other than how good they are at their job, which is poisonous inside institutions.
So on top of this recruiting crisis, that wasn't enough for this administration. During the COVID hysteria and in their attempt to fire 100,000 people who worked for bigger companies because they didn't get the COVID shot, or to mask 5-year-olds, they decided also to make this a central plank in their policy at the Pentagon. 8,000 well-trained, so we got a recruiting crisis, 8,000 well-trained men and women were fired. Will you commit today, Mr. Hegseth, to recruit these folks back, to give them back pay, and give them an apology from the United States government for how they were disrespected?
Senator, I will commit to this because the Commander-in-Chief has committed to this, that not only will they be reinstated, they will receive an apology, back pay, and rank that they lost because they were forced out due to an experimental vaccine.
Thank you, and I'm a limited time, but I just want to say, for all the talk of experience and not coming from the same cocktail parties that permanent Washington is used to, you are a breath of fresh air. And again, if you weren't paying attention to what this election was all about, it was about the disruptors versus the establishment. And the American people have had enough of business as usual for the same people that we line up for these same jobs who give us the same results. We need somebody who's going to go in there and fight for innovation, fight for change. I think you're that person, and I appreciate your willingness to sit here and listen to some of these undignified attacks. It's ridiculous. Thank you.
Captain Mark Kelly, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations on your chairmanship. I want to make a request to the committee that we have a second round of questions.
Pursuant to the bipartisan staff agreement that we reached late last year, this will be one round of 7-minute questions.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'll be happy to recognize my colleague, Mr. Reed.
I think it's important to note for the record that when Secretary Hagel was here, we had 3 rounds of questioning. When Secretary Carter was here, we had 2 rounds of questioning. And I cannot recall any time where I have denied, as the chairman, a member to ask for a second round and receive the second round. So we are, I think, violating the principles of the committee, and I just want to go on the record.
And your comment is noted.
Thank you.
Mr. Hegseth, thank you for being here today. Thank you for your service to this country.
Thank you, Senator.
Few nominees come into this room with all the necessary experience to do this job, to be Secretary of Defense. We get that. It's a reflection on just how big of a job this is. What I want to understand is whether or not you bring any of the necessary experience that this job requires. And here's where I'm concerned. Senator Coleman, in introducing you, and this is a quote, he said, "He has struggled and overcome great personal challenges," unquote. You walk in here saying that you've had personal and character issues in your past, including heavy drinking, which you wrote about. And you said, and this is a quote from you, that you said, "I sit before you as an open book." Yet you haven't actually said what personal challenges it is that you've overcome when you've been asked about them. So I'm going to give you an opportunity here to be as forthright as you say you want to be. So while leading Concerned Veterans of America, there were very specific cases cited by individuals about your conduct. I'm going to go through a few of them, and I just want you to tell me if these are true or false. Very simple. On Memorial Day 2014, at a CVA event in Virginia, you needed to be carried out of the event for being intoxicated.
Senator, anonymous smears.
Just true or false? Very simple. Summer of 2014 in Cleveland, drunk in public with the CVA team.
Anonymous smears.
I'm just asking for true or false questions, true or false answers. An event in North Carolina, drunk in front of 3 young female staff members after you had instituted a no alcohol policy and then reversed it. True or false?
Anonymous smears.
December of 2014 at the CVA Christmas party at the Grand Hyatt at Washington, D.C., you were noticeably intoxicated and had to be carried up to your room. Is that true or false?
Anonymous smears.
Another time, a CVA staffer stated that you passed out in the back of a party bus. Is that true or false?
Anonymous smears.
In 2014, while in Louisiana on official business for CVA, did you take your staff, including young female staff members, to a strip club?
Absolutely not. Anonymous smears.
So, is it accurate that the organization reached a financial settlement with a female staffer who claimed to be at a strip club with you, and there was a colleague who attempted to sexually assault her? Was there a financial settlement?
Senator, I was not involved in that. I don't know the nature of how that played out.
But you understand there was a financial settlement for a young female staffer who accused another member of the organization, not you, of sexual assault in a strip club.
We have multiple statements on the record referring to that.
But you claim you were not there when that occurred.
Absolutely not.
Now, the behavior I cited, if true, do you think that this behavior of intoxication, going into these type of establishments, women on your staff being so uncomfortable that they have to file these sort of harassment claims, do you think this is appropriate behavior for a leader?
Senator, the overwhelming majority of anyone who's worked for me, including the on-the-record statements that have been submitted to this, with their name on it, on the record, men and women who worked with me every day, are the overwhelming preponderance of evidence that testify to my leadership
and professionalism in leading Vets for Freedom and Concerned Veterans for America. My
Okay.
leadership has been completely impugned on these veterans organizations that did fantastic work.
Mr.
on behalf
Hegseth,
of the
I'm not
men
even
and
gonna
women
go
fighting
into the-
overseas
I'm not even
and
gonna go into
advocating,
the
and we managed our
accusations.
financial books with integrity across the board. How many people, everybody who runs a campaign.
I have limited time. I'm not going to get into the accusations that come from Fox News. I know you have some of your Fox News colleagues here. There were multiple instances of accusations against you about drinking on the job.
All
coming
anonymous,
in.
all false, all refuted by my colleagues who I worked with for 10 years at 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. and everything
The
in
challenge
between,
here for me,
and
Mr.
said
Hegseth,
they've only seen me be professional
is when there is
every
discussion
single time.
about personal challenges, and you admittedly had issues with heavy drinking. It's hard to kind of square this, to square the circle here. It's kind of a difficult thing to do. Let me ask you if I have about 90 seconds left here. If you had to answer these questions about sexual assault against you and your drinking and your personal conduct, would it have been different if you were under oath?
Senator, all I'm pointing out is the false claims against me.
Okay, I take it you do not want to answer that question. I walked into this hearing this morning concerned that you haven't demonstrated adequate leadership in your civilian roles. And this is a dangerous world we're living in here. And America cannot afford a Secretary of Defense who is unprepared for that mission. I'm going to leave with concerns about your transparency. You say you've had personal issues in your past, yet when asked about those very issues, you blame an anonymous smear campaign, even when many of these claims are not anonymous. Which is it? Have you overcome personal issues, or are you the target of a smear campaign? It can't be both. It's clear to me that you're not being honest with us or the American people because you know the truth would disqualify you from getting the job. And just as concerning as each of these specific disqualifying accusations are, what concerns me just as much is the idea of having a Secretary of Defense who is not transparent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my 2 seconds.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. I would, at this point, ask unanimous consent to introduce into the record letters by Tina Kingston, Louisiana State Director of Concerned Veterans for America, and Holly Talley, Louisiana Local Director of Concerned Veterans for America, attesting to the appropriateness of Mr. Hegseth's conduct with regard to female staffers. Without objection, that is added to the record. And Senator Banks, you are now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Hegseth. You have conducted yourself very well today. In fact, so well that I believe it's incumbent upon this committee to confirm you ASAP to get you on the job to clean up the mess that we have at the Pentagon ongoing at this moment because of the leadership there over the last 4 years that's failed us. In President Biden's first year in office, the Department of Defense spent over 5 million man-hours on quote-unquote counter-extremism and diversity training, what you and I might call woke training or DEI. The administration has refused to provide us any more recent data than that first year, but we know that it's exponentially more man-hours wasted on DEI over the last 4 years. And I wonder, what do you make of that? What could those 5 million man-hours in that first year of Secretary Austin and President Biden's administration, what could those 5 million man-hours have been used for?
Senator, that's a lot of service members sitting in a lot of briefs, hearing about a lot of threats or political perspectives that might be dangerous, that do not comport to threats that actually exist inside the force, or ideas that introduce critical race theory or DEI or climate change initiatives that they and their commands have to conform to. And every time one of those happens, it gets pushed down the chain of command. That also includes new layers of leadership that have been created under this administration, committed to enforcing those types of DEI and CRT initiatives. So we hear 5 million man-hours, and that sounds like a lot. The more troubling aspect is how many training hours that takes away from a company commander or battalion commander or a wing commander who's out there trying to maintain their force, which is already constrained because of what the Biden administration has done to the defense budget and defense capabilities. So they're having to choose between the political prerogatives of the civilians who are demanding more DEI and CRT and gender quotas and the readiness of their forces. And I believe this Pentagon is prepared because of our commander-in-chief for a Secretary of Defense, should I be confirmed, that laser focuses on these issues, and they're ready to respond. They want to pack their rucksacks and go train because they understand we live in a dangerous world.
I think that's an important point, a key point, because months later, while the priority of the Biden-Austin-led Pentagon was on DEI and woke training, one of the biggest embarrassments in American history happened when we lost 13 of our heroes in the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. Secretary Austin testified before the House Armed Services Committee a couple of years ago, and responding to a question from me said he had, quote, no regrets about what happened in Afghanistan. I wonder, what do you make of that?
Senator, it's shameful. They still tout it as the most successful airlift in American history, when what the rest of us all saw was true laid before our eyes. Utter failure, a destruction of a military legacy there, abandonment of our allies, death of American troops, detriment to our reputation, and then no answers and no accountability on the other side. And then what was unleashed because of what happened in Afghanistan? The October 7th attacks, an invasion into Ukraine. The world recognized weakness for what it was. And who bore the brunt for it? The troops on the front lines that had an impossible job, whose external security was the Taliban, because there was no actual plan for this under the Biden administration. And yet, not a single person, the only person held accountable in those moments was a Marine Corps lieutenant colonel who had the courage to stand up and say someone should be held accountable for that. His name is Stu Scheller. No one else involved has ever taken accountability for it. When that microcosm becomes the reception of the American military or America's commitment to victory and success and positive outcomes, the world responds to that. Warrior culture back, rebuilding our military, and ending wars properly. And if we have to fight them, winning them decisively.
I served in Afghanistan, you served in Afghanistan. 75% of our nation's veterans disagree with how the withdrawal from Afghanistan was handled, the embarrassment of it. What that's done, I believe, has directly impacted our historic recruitment crisis in this country, without a doubt. And you've already talked about that, but how do we fix it? How do we bring pride back to wearing the uniform for the next generation, to inspire them to do what you and I did, to raise our right hand and take that oath and serve this great country? I
really do think it comes back to strong, clear leadership, patriotic, pro-American leadership that's going to focus on all the other political prerogatives. That's why we all have political perspectives. I said this before and I'll say it again. In uniform, none of that matters. You wear green, you wear blue, you bleed red. That's it. Who you vote for doesn't matter. But when the perception of that changes, then you don't want people deciding whether to serve based on a political party in power. That's a dangerous thing for continuity inside your military. Now, President Trump, and if I'm confirmed with my leadership, we're going to restore the continuity of an apolitical military that acts decisively and only based on merit. They sound basic, but they're fundamental.
You and I agree that wokeness is weakness. Mr. Hegseth, do you support racial quotas in recruitment or promotions in the United States military?
Senator, I do not support any form of racial quota.
Do you support affirmative action in our nation's military academies?
Senator, I only support hiring and admitting the best and brightest, whatever their background is.
I think that's very important. Mr. Hegseth, Lloyd Austin, the secretary, later went AWOL. He disappeared for days and never told the president, didn't even inform the president's chief of staff that he was going into the hospital. Would that ever occur on your watch?
No, Senator. I know in any one of my jobs, if I had decided to go AWOL for even a day or two in uniform or around that, that would have been a concern.
I believe accountability matters. No one to this day has ever, as you've said, been held accountable for what happened in Afghanistan. It was embarrassing to this country. It's impacted this country greatly. And I applaud you and President Trump for bringing accountability back to our Pentagon. With that, I yield back.
Chair recognizes the distinguished ranking member for unanimous consent request.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit an article discussing some of the issues of readiness and DEI. There has been 5.9 million man-hours that have been used for DEI. General Milley clarified that that is an estimate out of more than 2 billion man-hours that the Department of Defense invested during the time period.
Where is this published, sir?
This is published by Megan Myers, and I will get the
okay.
Military.com, I'm sorry.
Without objection, it will be admitted to the record.
Thank you, Mr.
And Senator Slotkin, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, and thank you for referencing the great Carl Levin as you introduced me. We miss him in Michigan. For those who I haven't met in my 1 week that I've been sworn into the Senate, I'm a CIA officer recruited after 9/11. I did 3 tours armed in Iraq alongside the military. Have worked for 4 different secretaries of defense, both Democrat and Republican, proudly, and watched them make decisions that literally determine the life and death of Americans in the dark of night. I'm also a Democrat representing a state that Trump won, right? We both won on the same ballot. So I understand that President Trump has the right to nominate his people. We are going to have policies that we disagree with. All of that, to me, comes very standard. What I think I'm most concerned with is that no president has the right to use the uniformed military in a way that violates the U.S. Constitution and further taints the military as that apolitical institution that we all want, right? And our founders designed the system so that, we had posse comitatus, that we weren't going to use active duty military inside the United States and make American citizens potentially scared of their own military. We went through our own experience with that with the British. As the Secretary of Defense, you will be the one man standing in the breach should President Trump give an illegal order, right? I'm not saying he will, but if he does, you are going to be the guy that he calls to implement this order. Do you agree that there are some orders that can be given by that would violate the U.S. Constitution?
Senator, thank you for your service. But I reject the premise that President Trump is going to be giving illegal orders.
No, I'm not saying, but do you believe there is such a thing as an illegal order that Joe Biden or any other president, Donald Trump, could give? Is there anything that a commander-in-chief could ask you to do with the uniformed military that would be in violation of the U.S. Constitution?
Senator, anybody of any party
Right.
could give an order that is against the Constitution or against the law.
Right. Okay. So are you saying that you would stand in the breach and push back if you were given an illegal order?
I start by saying I reject the premise that President Trump will be
understand.
giving
You've done your
any
genuflecting
illegal
to him,
orders
but
at all.
This isn't a hypothetical, okay? Your predecessor in a Trump administration, Secretary Esper, was asked and did use uniformed military to clear unarmed protesters. He was given the order to potentially shoot at them. Helos flew low in Washington, D.C. as crowd control. He later apologized publicly for those actions. Was he right or wrong to apologize?
Senator, I was there on the ground.
And
I saw the hell
I understand, and I respect that.
I've been there.
But you're
I
about
understand
to
the
be
level
the
of threat
Secretary of Defense.
that was involved in that moment. I
Was
also
he right
understand
to? So he was
legality and the Constitution.
Sir, was he right
and the
or
laws of what
wrong
you
to
have.
apologize?
I'm not going to put words in the mouth of Secretary Esper or anybody else. from
he
this
said them
podium.
himself. You don't have to. What are you scared of? Did he the right thing by apologizing?
I'm not scared of anything, Senator.
Then say
I'm
yes or no.
interested
You
in
can say no.
upholding the laws and the Constitution
Okay.
in any
So
particular
Donald
scenario.
Trump asked for the active duty 82nd Airborne to be deployed during that same time. Secretary Esper has written that he convinced him against that decision. If Donald Trump asked you to use the 82nd Airborne in law enforcement roles in Washington, D.C., would you also convince him otherwise?
I'm not going to get ahead of conversations I would have with the president. However, there are laws and processes inside our Constitution that would be followed.
President Trump said in November that he is willing to consider using the active duty military against the, quote, enemy within. Have you been personally involved in discussions of using the U.S. military active duty inside the United States?
Senator, I'm glad we finally got to the topic of border security equaling national security, because it's been abdicated and ignored for the last 4 years.
That wasn't my question. I'm just asking, have you been involved? You're about to be the Secretary of Defense, potentially. Have you been involved in discussions about using the active duty military inside the United States?
Senator, I am not yet the Secretary of Defense.
Right. I'm
if
just
confirmed, I would be to any number of
So you haven't been in any of these
which
conversations?
I would not reveal what I have discussed with the President of the United States.
Just have you been in conversations? You're going to be in charge of 3 million people, the active duty that I know you care about. I believe you care about. So have you been in conversations about using the active duty in any way, whether it's setting up in detention camps, policing dangerous cities? Have you been involved in any of those conversations?
Certainly, I have been involved in conversations relating to doing things this administration has not, which cure the southern border and not allow floods of illegals to enter our country through an invasion that threatens the American people. And there are ways in which the military is already playing a role in that, to include 5,000 national men from Indiana and Texas. We're at the border right now allowing for border security. So there is plenty of precedent
duty military
for military
to
members
staff
enforcing
detention
our southern
centers?
border.
Our U.S. military is not trained in law enforcement roles. I think you know that, right? We've seen how that mission is difficult for them in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, because that's not the training a uniformed military comes with. Do you support the use of active duty military in supporting detention camps?
Senator, everything we will do would be lawful and under the Constitution, but I recognize that this administration has abdicated its responsibility. President Trump is going to restore order at the border, prevent our enemies from invading, and yes, he has said
Sir, I get your filibustering. I get it.
Part of what happens.
In the spirit of preserving the institution that I think we both care about, legitimately, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I've heard a couple of different things. One, you said you will not change the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which is what governs this system in the military. Yes or no? You said that earlier.
Those are laws, Senator, set by Congress.
Okay, so you will not go to change it. You will not attempt to change it. Also said that JAG officers are potentially people who put their own interests in their own medals and promotions ahead of the troops. Senator Lindsey Graham was a JAG officer for most of his life. Is that what you believe about those who implement our justice system in the U.S. military?
Senator, I was speaking about particular JAG officers I've had to deal with in my military experience,
Are you going to get
not
involved?
about a member of the United States Senate.
Are you, as Secretary of Defense, going to get involved in the implementation of the U.S. Military Code of Justice?
Senator, ultimately, it will be a big part of my job to evaluate decisions vis-a-vis the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Yes. Have you seen
fairly.
Is CQ Brown on your list in the Warrior boards to be removed from his position?
Senator, every single senior officer will be reviewed based on meritocracy, standards, and lethality, and to lawful orders they will be given.
Thank you, Senator Slotkin. I now recognize Senator Shaheen for a unanimous consent request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a request from a former general who served 35 years, Dennis Leitch, who most recently was commander of the 94th Regional Readiness Command at Fort Devens, Mass., who has asked that his letter opposing Mr. Hegseth's nomination be entered into the record.
Is there objection? Without objection, it will be entered. Also, I present a host of letters and op-eds from former co-workers at Vets for Freedom and Concerned Vets for America, as well as Fox News Channel. I also have letters and op-eds from many veterans and Iraqis and Afghanis who were helped by Mr. Hegseth. I ask unanimous consent to introduce these letters and op-eds. Without objection, is so ordered. Senator Sheehy, you've been very patient.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. entering a support letter in for Mr. Hegseth, submitted by nearly 90 former soldiers who served with Pete in combat. I would like to submit a statement from 86 of them who support his nomination, although they come from different units and ranks. The signatories commend Mr. Hegseth for his selfless leadership, love of his soldiers, and commitment to our country.
2 items.
Sorry, 1 item. I ask unanimous consent to enter this into the record.
Without objection, it will be entered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pete, I'm actually going to ask you questions because I want to hear your answer. How many genders are there? Tough one.
Senator, there are 2 genders.
I know that well. I'm a she-he, so I'm on board. What is the diameter of the rifle round fired out of an M4A1 rifle?
That's a 5.56.
How many push-ups can you do?
I did 5 sets of 47 this morning.
What do you think are most important strategic bases in the Pacific?
In the Pacific, Guam is pretty strategically significant.
How many rounds of 5.56 can you fit into the magazine of an M4 rifle?
Depends on the magazine, but standard issue is 30, Senator.
And what size round does the M9 Beretta standard issue sidearm for the military fire?
A 9mm, Senator.
What kind of batteries do you put in your night vision goggle?
Duracell.
So right there, you're representing qualifications that show you understand what the warfighter deals with every single day on the battlefield. You understand what happens on the front line where our troops will be. And what happens, unfortunately, in this country is decisions made in rooms like this, bad decisions, end up in dead 17, 18, 19-year-old Americans. And those Americans rarely come from families that sit in rooms like this. They come from lower, middle-income families who sometimes the military is their only way out. And they join because maybe they want to go to college. Maybe they know the choice. Maybe they love this country. But for whatever reason, they joined and they sat on the dotted line. And when people like us screw up, they don't come home. And that's the one thing that I care about. As you remember when I shut the door, when you came with your entourage, Senator Coleman, I've known for a long time, and you and I sat together, asked you one question. You remember what that question was?
Are you going to have the backs of the warfighters?
Exactly. What is going to be your #1 priority? And I don't care, frankly, what all these letters and articles say. I've been a part of a smear campaign too, I get it. I care that you're going to have one thing in mind when you sit in that chair in that 5-sided building, and you told me what that was. So with that, you have my support. I'm sorry you have to go through a process like this, but it is one of the most important jobs in the world. We got to make sure you're ready for it. I thank you for your answers. One final question that's very important to me. This is more of a technical question, but I think it's to fix the Army in this country is a 1 or 2 year problem. We can make bullets, we can make rifles. Fix the Air Force might be a 5-year problem. To fix our Navy is a decades-long pursuit. How are you going to fix our national? You don't have all the power. We're not China. Unfortunately, you can't snap your fingers. But how are you going to lead an initiative within the DoD to reinvigorate our national shipbuilding industry so we are able to compete with China? Because freedom of navigation is critical to our economy and the global economy. It's going to be a very important task for you to complete.
It's a critical question, Senator, and that's why I'm grateful that President Trump has said definitively to me and publicly that shipbuilding will be one of his absolute top priorities of this administration. So a lot of it does go into pulling things up into the OSD's office, Secretary of Defense's office, to shine a spotlight on it, to make sure the bureaucracy doesn't strangle important initiatives that need to happen. We need to reinvigorate our defense industrial base in this country to include our shipbuilding capacity. Some of it is on the east, some of it's on the west, some of it's on the Great Lakes. The workforce problems that our shipyards are facing are significant, and there's been a big investment from this committee, I know, in a lot of those places because of the shortfalls, manpower issues, everything else. But we also see adversaries that have been able to innovate themselves in ways that their shipbuilding capacity is, I won't reveal it at this hearing, multitudes and multitudes beyond our capabilities. So it needs to be a rapid investment, a rapid fielding, and then we need to incentivize outside entities to fill the gap. We've talked a lot about UAVs. UAVs are very important, but there's also a future of UUVs, unmanned underwater vehicles, that will be a part of amplifying the impact of our Navy, because this administration has allowed our number of ships to drop below 300. It sets a projection of 340 or 350, but doesn't create the capacity to actually address it. And so if we're going to defend our interests, our allies, and put America first, we're going to have to be able to project power. That means shipbuilding. It means historic investments in our defense industrial base there. And then also driving innovation and cost savings in ways that only business leaders inside the Pentagon can do.
When I'd add, I don't think any board in the world would have hired Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg when they founded their companies either. So this country was founded by young people who had a great vision. Thank you for being willing to serve your country again. And thanks for coming here today. I yield back, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sheehy. You yield back the balance of your time. Mr. Ranking Member, can we agree that you and I will notify members of a specific time until which the record will remain open for submission of questions for the record?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
That will be a day or two. This concludes today's hearing. I want to thank the witnesses and their families, and this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.
Well, that's only the beginning of the embarrassing round of confirmation hearings we're going to have, because next up, we've got Pam Bondi. She's the Florida Attorney General, I think, who did the bidding for the Republican Party for years. That is, I believe, tomorrow. Let me check out. Let me check out C-SPAN here and see what they have going on. Bondi's confirmation hearing is... It's coming up. I know it's coming up, but boy, oh boy, Pete Hegseth. I thought it was remarkable when Arizona Senator Kelly was asking him, yes or no, did these things happen? And his response was anonymous. They were anonymous claims. Oh, it's all anonymous. Can't say yes or no, right? Because again, he's under oath, which he did lie multiple times when he was being grilled by which senator? I made a clip on. Oh boy, it wasn't Tammy Duckworth. It was Mazie Hirono. Mazie Hirono asking him point blank if he had ever made unwanted sexual advancements, to which Pete Hegseth said, no, not me. Even though he signed an NDA with the woman who accused him of raping her back in 2017. And remember, this was a woman who was a Republican at a Republican conference. So, you know, the whole Democrats are out here trying to just slander Pete Hegseth is, as Biden would put it, a bunch of malarkey. Anyway, I do want to say hello to LB. Really appreciate you coming in and stopping by the stream. Lenny, of course, the moderator, for coming in. Lenny's also a longtime member. If you guys want to sign up for memberships, that goes straight to helping Reflect Politics and my channel grow here. Also, thank you for liking the video. I know that over on Facebook, there are a ton of people liking the stream. Nena Iborra, Sarah Rodriguez, Steve Lishman, Pat Lavelle, Arthur Ruiz, Jeffrey Davis, Daniel Hounshell. Thank you guys for watching. Let's see kind of what's going on here. I did want to watch Ted Lieu answer questions from the press because Ted Lieu and Garcia are always fantastic representatives to hear.
Thank you, Representative Rivas. Appreciate my colleagues
How are we
joining
doing
us
with the
here
audio?
today.
Let me know.
Questions?
I'm still trying to figure out this streaming audio.
Joe, appreciate you auditing this course and joining us here.
Here we are. If you guys have a problem hearing, let me know. It's kind of tough with I've got so many screens and volumes going. Ridge Runner, definitely not qualified. 100%.
Obviously, I mean, we have a pretty robust track record when it comes to disaster assistance and emergency supplementals, you know, the terms we throw around here when it comes to disasters, whether it was Hurricane Katrina or Hurricane, Sandy. In years past, Democrats, even when we had united control, never asked red states or Republicans for anything. We prioritized helping people. We prioritized funding the disaster relief fund so people could get the assistance that they need. We prioritized community development block grant funding for disaster recovery that was specific to those who have gone through events like this, whether that was Louisiana or Hawaii and Maui or New York or the Carolinas. It would never cross our mind to add conditions. And that's why it's unconscionable that Speaker Johnson would raise this issue. But let's separate this, because what Speaker Johnson is doing, he does not have the votes to raise the debt limit. So he is trying to do everything he can so Donald Trump can have a victory, so billionaires and the largest corporations can continue to enjoy tax treatment that they want to the tune of a couple $1 trillion. In order to do that, they have to raise the debt limit. He does not have the votes for that. And so that's why he is joining these two. And we expect them to talk about a lot of issues that they could address if the debt limit was raised. The important piece, as the vice chair noted, these disasters don't have red and blue ties on it when they come into our communities. We just need to provide the aid and the assistance so people can recover and get back to some sense of normalcy. Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last night, or a little after midnight, Mayor Garland released Jack Smith's report on the January 6th investigation into President-elect Trump. The report said that had President Trump not been elected, and if he wasn't coming into office next week, that he probably would, that Jack Smith was confident that he would have been convicted and that the DOJ would be able to sustain that conviction. I want to get your thoughts. Have you been able to see any of the report yet? What are your thoughts on the fact that he may have been convicted had the election not gone the way that it went?
Okay, not sure if you guys can hear that question, but essentially asking about Jack Smith and the report that was dropped in the early morning hours on the East Coast, late night here on the West Coast. Jack Smith essentially ended the report by saying that if Donald Trump was not elected, if he did not win this election, then Jack Smith had the goods. He would have convicted Donald Trump.
I appreciate that this is now public. I look forward to reading it. I have not to date read that specific piece, but as you know, the January 6th committee talked about election interference. We talked about the fake electors scam at length, so I'm familiar with the topic and familiar with some of the testimony that they took. Jack Smith and the Department of Justice had access to more grand jury transcripts and information than the January 6th committee did, but the facts remain that President Trump intimately was part of the election interference. Having fake electors and trying to thwart a peaceful transfer of power. And so that is part of the public narrative. I mean, those are the facts. What the January 6th committee did is we raised those facts and put them in a report that the former president and incoming president is not happy with. But the facts are not changed, and we saw this. The public saw this as we reported it in real time, and as we reported it after the event through our committee. And now the public will have a more thorough report as a result of Jack Smith's documents being released. And I think all of the documents should be released. I've said this publicly. Mike Pence's transcript to the grand jury should be released. The other part of the special counsel's report should be released on the classified documents. All of that should be released in advance of Monday. The American public deserve to see exactly who Donald Trump is. I respect that he was elected, but the American public deserves a higher level of visibility into his role in those events. Scott?
Mr. Chairman, on page 112 of that report, you will see that Jack Smith emphasizes the menacing, harassment, and threats people get for defying Trump.
Yeah.
Being part of the investigation.
Okay.
You concerned about retribution, safety?
Yeah.
All right. So this question is about page 112 of the report. And actually, I was reading through the report last night, and I'm going to bring up my Twitter page really quick here because I want to read to you guys what Jack Smith said. And if you guys aren't following me over on Twitter, be sure to go over there and do that at Brennan Plank. That is me. Okay. What I tweeted, Jack Smith's accounting of Trump's threats against officials and witnesses during the investigation is staggering. Okay, and let's read this. The same pattern transpired after Mr. Trump's indictment in the election case. As the D.C. Circuit later found, Mr. Trump repeatedly attacked those involved in the case through threatening public statements, as well as messaging daggered at likely witnesses and their testimony. Those attacks had, quote, real-time, real-world consequences, exposing those on the receiving end to a torrent of threats and intimidation and turning their lives upside down. The day after his arraignment, for example, Mr. Trump posted on the social media application Truth Social, "If you go after me, I'm coming after you." The next day, one of his supporters called the district court judge's chambers and said, "Hey, you stupid slave. If Trump doesn't get elected in 2024, we are coming to kill you. So tread lightly. You will be targeted personally, publicly, your family, all of it." Mr. Trump also took aim at potential witnesses named in the indictment and lashed out at government officials closely involved in the criminal proceeding, as well as members of their family. That is what Garcia is responding to here. We'll see if he is even aware of Jack Smith's comments in the report.
The January 6th committee, I mean, our members, it was just such an honor to be part of that group of public servants. But that is a group that is not going to be intimidated by Donald Trump. We know exactly who he is. We took the testimony from folks who shared a lot of those same beliefs, being yelled at and screamed at by the former president. The threats and the intimidation is not something that scares us. We stand by the work product. We stand by the work that we did. We stand by our ability to have a fair process and an open process where we gathered facts and presented them to the public and then preserved everything for the public to look at. Footnotes and transcripts is all in the public record. And so we stand by our important work and aren't going to be intimidated by the prior and incoming president.
You know, he really doesn't need to have that quote that I read, because Garcia has undoubtedly gotten death threats from these mega terrorists. Nearly, I would probably say I'm willing to put good faith into saying that probably every Democratic representative has been threatened by the mega terrorist cult.
Nick, and then
I want to ask about the reporting that members of the January 6th Select Committee discussed pardons for their work. Have you sought a pardon, or would you be interested in one? And do you think staff of that Select Committee should receive pardons?
have not sought a pardon, have not talked to anyone in the White House related to a pardon. I stand by the work that we did. We didn't do anything wrong. I don't think a pardon is necessary. We committed to do a process together. To shine light on exactly what happened on January 6th and the lead up and the president's role in thwarting a peaceful transfer of power. That's exactly what we did, and we stand by that work product. I'm not aware of any conversations with the White House related to that.
You know, it's funny how you've got Kinzinger, you've got Garcia, you've got Democrats, you've got Republicans on the committee, on the committee looking into 1-6 saying, we don't need pardons. I don't want to pardon Biden. I'm not going to pardon myself. I didn't do anything wrong. And then let's flip the page. And you've got Jim Jordan, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, all, oh, President Trump, please give me a pardon. Isn't that interesting?
No debate. There's been no debate over any bills, but yet, as part of the original rules which established the House procedures, it contained the Born Alive Survivors Protection Act along with 11 other bills. Just your reaction to that, the Republicans putting that in and not allowing for any sort of compromise, any sort of debate on the issues, and with them bringing up more pro-life measures in the future.
Yeah, and this is pretty standard for the House Republican Conference. We've seen them run these plays in the past. To Representative Olszewski's main point, none of these bills that they are advancing would lower the costs for the American public. None of these bills are going to lower grocery costs, make housing more affordable. That's the unfortunate part, and it's a missed opportunity. Because the American public has said very clearly that they want us to work together to solve problems. And none of the bills that they are proposing would do that. What it has done, it has allowed them to buy some time. I saw this morning that the speaker indicated that we're going to have a rules chair now. That is an important part of how you govern and what is necessary in order to bring bills to the floor. This might be the latest that we've ever seen a rules chair seated. But what those bills did that you're mentioning is it allowed them to buy a little bit of time to bring these up without a rules committee in place. So maybe that was the goal, but either way, the result is the same. The American public get no help and support from the initial 12 bills that House Republicans are bringing.
Right. And that was the whole, that was what this election was all about. It's like, okay, people believe that Donald Trump was going to actually, with his beautiful, big, high IQ corporate brain that bankrupted 6 companies and that left a trail of lawsuits and contractors unpaid and devastated, that he was going to be the one to drop prices, to do it even before he gets into office, right? That was Donald Trump's whole thing about Ukraine. It's going to be solved before I even get into office. He gets elected, and it's, wait, what? So what are you going to do? What are you going to do about Ukraine? What are you going to do about grocery prices? Well, you know, all that stuff's really hard to deal with. So, you know, you're on your own, America. I got mine. And that's essentially the Republican Party in a nutshell. MAGA in a nutshell. Screw everyone. Get yours. And move on.
Cassie.
Mr. Chair, there's been a lot of discussion over the last several days about these proposed conditions that are a mystery as to what they might be besides raising the debt limit. But there is a question to be asked here about whether or not Democrats are ready to reject a vote on aid if they do not find those conditions palatable. Are Democrats having that discussion? Are they prepared to vote against it if they don't believe the conditions are, you know, something that you guys can support?
We will not support conditions to disaster assistance. We can have a lengthy debate and discussion and use the committee process to have discussions about the steps that California has taken to protect itself, whether that's doubling the fire professionals in California to a record number of resources, billions of dollars to clearing brush in a preventative way, or as the former president talks about, raking the leaves. California has put the resources in to do that work. It's a big state. The federal government has a responsibility between the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management as well to be thoughtful partners. And so we are not absolved of any of this, and we have a meaningful role to play. House Democrats are willing to roll up our sleeves and to stay here as long as possible to have the conversations. But at the end of the day, ultimately, this will mean disaster assistance, and that needs to be free from partisan conditions. We did not put partisan conditions on Florida or Louisiana or the Carolinas when we offered aid. Partisan conditions are not helpful and will distract from the help and, more importantly, delay the help that's necessary for the American public.
May I ask a follow-up?
Sure. And then the Vice Chair.
So just a short while ago, the speaker walked out of here and said that this is not partisan, that this is not politics, that they want to have safeguards, making sure that this money is used the way it's supposed to be used. But then he has members going out there and telling reporters that they need to get a pound of flesh for every dollar spent in California. So, I mean, what do you make of his claims that this isn't partisan politics when he has members out there saying that?
The speaker's comments and some of the members of the Republican caucus comments are outrageous. When Mother Nature strikes, she doesn't go, hey, are you a Democrat or Republican? Because if you're a Democrat, I'm going to take your home and burn it. And if you're a Republican, I'm not. That's not what happened. Republicans lost homes. So did independents. So did people who weren't voters. All sorts of Americans lost their homes. And think how absurd it is to say, we're not going to rebuild this post office because it's used by 60% Democrats and 40% Republicans. We never do that. So when a tornado strikes in a red state, or a flood happens in a red state, or hurricane affects a red state, we don't go, oh, it's a red state, we're not going to provide disaster relief. So what the Republicans are doing is really, really outrageous. We are the United States of America. It's 50 states. And by the way, California provides more in taxes to the federal government than it gets back in services. California is subsidizing a bunch of red states. And so if you want to just look at the actual numbers, it is even more outrageous that somehow Speaker Johnson wants to publish Americans who happen to live in Southern California, including Republicans who happen to live in Southern California.
Right. And on top of that,
yield briefly
on top of that, let's see, what state is Mike Johnson from again? Yeah, he's from Louisiana. You also had these Republican representatives from Wyoming, Iowa, places that suck on the teat of California. And they're the ones who are coming out and saying, well, California better rethink their liberal policies. Like exactly what Ted Lieu said there. California contributes more than it takes, right? Places like Iowa, places like Wyoming, they get more federal funding from California. And so the idea that you guys are going to tell, so I'm in California, I'm in Southern California, I'm only 100 miles south of these fires. The idea that these clowns from these states are going to tell California that we need to rethink our policies, it's outrageous.
Representative Rivas, who was a former state legislator as well, who dealt with these issues.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The state of California has invested in wildfire mitigation efforts for years, but this weekend, Chair Aguilar and I joined Congressmember Judy Chu for the destruction that the Eaton fire did in Altadena. And anyone that visits that, you just want disaster aid to be there immediately. And Speaker Johnson has not visited California. I think the members of the districts most affected would be happy to invite him to witness this destruction. And from once you see it, you'll know that we need to send aid immediately.
Yeah. On that point, visiting California, right? You've heard Republicans going after Bass, the mayor of LA, because she took a trip to honor Nelson Mandela in South Africa, a trip of a lifetime that I don't think many people would ever pass up on. And she left on the trip before the wildfires started, and now it's she's not in LA. How dare she? When they were pretty quiet when Ted Cruz was fleeing Texas to go to Mexico, right? But another person who the Republicans have been largely silent on is Kristi Noem, the incoming, was she Homeland Security, I believe, who oversees FEMA. We went over this on yesterday's live stream. Pretty sure it's Kristi Noem, Homeland Security. Yeah, Homeland Security. She hasn't visited California. And let's check on her Twitter page to see if maybe, I don't know, has she said anything about these wildfires? Let's see. Let's see if she's updated it. She didn't say anything yesterday. Nope. Nothing. This is the person who's coming in who will be leading and overseeing the FEMA disaster relief efforts. Whoops. It's like you don't give a shit, Kristi Noem or Donald Trump or the Republican Party about anybody but themselves.
Right? There's people that have lost everything in parts of Los Angeles that will take long to recover. They're scared. Where are they going to live? Do they still have to pay their mortgage payments? Do they still have to pay utilities? It's going to take years to rebuild these communities. People lost their churches, their schools, their stores, their businesses. There's people that lost both their business and their home.
Everything.
We have to help the people in California rebuild and recover.
You have these pieces of shit.
Representative Rivas and I stood at an intersection in Altadena and saw in between two churches that had been completely burned down. I guess my question to the speaker is, what do you tell those congregants? What do you tell those community members who will see delays because of politicizing the disaster assistance? That's unfair, and it's wrong. Last question back.
Republicans' protection of women and growth in sports act. What is particularly concerning to Democratic caucus legislation?
A couple things are concerning. First, that we talked about before, is that House Republican Conference decides to bring this up before they want to address economic issues, rising grocery prices, rising costs of living that Americans are facing. We believe fundamentally in the fairness of sports. Members of the House Democratic Caucus, some of them played Division I sports. Many people have been shaped by being sports parents, and we kind of view it through that prism first. But we cannot stand and allow politicizing kids' sports to be used as a political tool. But to your question, what is most offensive about the legislation is that it doesn't distinguish girls' sports at what age. It doesn't distinguish whether you're an Olympic athlete, an NCAA player, a high school sports player regulated by your state, or whether you're just playing soccer as a 4-year-old or 5-year-old down the street. It potentially could lead to inspections, individuals raising concerns, and how you proceed with that is something that is concerning to the House Democratic Caucus. And so that's why, we felt that this is the GOP Child Predator Empowerment Act And this puts kids at risk, whether you play gymnastics, whether you play football, or whether you're a wrestler. This puts you at risk. Kids as young as 4 could be asked for personal inspections. There is nothing in the bill that talks about parental consent of those inspections. There's nothing in the bill that talks about at what level an inspection is necessary. That is concerning. That will be abused, and that is overwhelmingly the position of House Democrats and why we have strong reservations about the legislation.
Oh my God. So not only is it just utterly disgusting from an, like, the origin, the concept of that, of, hey, you know, we need to determine your sex, but it's just incredibly irresponsibly drafted. Like, this is what I talked about with Pete Hegseth, and having someone like that as the defense secretary, having someone who talks about unleashing the warriors and the burdensome, you know, regulations of the Geneva Convention. Also someone who, you know, doesn't believe that women should be in these combat roles. And, you know, well, it's not really the soldier's fault if a woman is in that combat role and he sexually assaults that female soldier. They open the door for people to commit crimes. Like, this legislation opening the door for some drunk hick from wherever to say, hey, you know, that 4-year-old, I'm gonna do the right thing and I'm gonna conduct a sex search. Like, what the fuck are we doing? What the fuck are we doing? God.
Look,
you gotta try.
Being a kid, being a teenager in this world is pretty tough. I can't speak to a trans athlete or someone who has that lived experience, but I can imagine it's incredibly tough for them, and to subject them to a higher level of intimidation and scrutiny is something that is just flat out bullying. And that's nothing that we can sign up for. That's nothing that we can support. And so those of us who oppose the bill are speaking up against that. Much of this is regulated by the NCAA or by state organizations who guide these efforts. By our count, it was 10 athletes in the NCAA who have been affected by this. They have found a way to work through this. 10 athletes out of 500,000 athletes. That's the scope of what we're dealing with. So the House Republican Conference would choose to have this conversation rather than something that is more expansive, that truly helps lower costs or make people's lives better. That's what they've chosen. That's what their leadership has chosen, and that says a lot about who they are.
Isn't it funny how the Republican Party is, they claim to be this party of, like, family values, and, you know, you've got these fucking weirdos like Elon Musk who's out there like, we need to, like, be having more kids. And yet every step they take, it makes people who are part of, like, the liberal consensus, it makes us just go, why the fuck would we have a kid in the world that you want to lay out for us? In your incredibly warped world. Yet they're the ones who want to protect the families. Right. Their families. Their white Christian families. Everybody else go to hell. Everybody else, I'm gonna search you. I'm gonna search your kids' genitals. Jesus. Good God.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. So here's the Democratic strategy, it seems like, moving forward. And this is going to piss a lot of people off, right? This is going to piss a lot of people off because, you know, there are days I wake up and I'm like, man, Democratic Party, burn this fucking thing to the ground. Like, just wage every war you can, resist at every chance you can. But there's a reason why I'm not in Democratic leadership. And so it's very clear that Hakeem and Democratic leadership are going to try to stay above the fray at every chance they can. And they are going to pick and choose their battles whenever they can, because we all know that Donald Trump is going to be impeached again, right? Like, that shit is going to happen. It's just a matter of when, right? When is Donald Trump going to do something that is so egregious where he tries to, quid pro quo his way out of something, and he gets caught? When is that going to happen? And so that's kind of where we're at, is the Democratic leadership is just going, hey, look, all right, your transgender bullshit, your Pete Hegseth bullshit, all of this stuff, right, is a small fire compared to what we're about to see come from the White House, the dumpster fire of corruption that we're about to see. And so that's why I think Democrats are largely just trying to circle the wagons and just go, all right, guys, be ready for what's to come from Donald Trump, because it's going to be the most egregious, blatant abuse of power that we've ever seen. Don't know what it's going to look like, but we all know it's coming, right? And so I think we got to keep that in mind. The most passionate among us, like a lot of my viewers, and we are so, like, of course we're fed up with just Trump and this MAGA bullshit. We're so, Lenny was saying how, she's kind of just bummed, and it's been depressing the past couple months. I've been there too. The past few months have been so fucking hard, especially, just because of how much we're in this. And so I think a lot of us who are of that mindset, and I've been there over the past couple months, of like, hey, just burn this shit to the ground. You know what I mean? Like, push back against these Republicans every step of the way. I understand how a lot of us would listen to these press conferences and go, God damn it. Like, why aren't we up in arms? Why aren't we, just ecstatically, energetically pushing back? And I think that's because a lot of us are still kind of recovering from the past couple of months. And it's because, leadership knows what's to come. And if we burn our candles too brightly here in the beginning, then do we risk, not having enough wick to fight Trump when it's most important and when it's most critical? Before I end the stream, guys, please let me know in the comments where you guys are watching from. When I was streaming during the campaign, man, we had people from all over the world who were interested in watching. The past couple months, like I said, I've been not in a very good place, and I'm trying to get back to it. And so I haven't been streaming. A lot of the members have left. Then viewership is down, and I totally get why that's happening. But and that's kind of one of the reasons why I appreciate you guys so much being here still, because we're still in it, and there is still light at the end of this dark tunnel that we're entering. So before I log off just for this live stream, I might be back later depending on kind of what's going on in DC and around the world. But yeah, please let me know where you guys are watching from, whether that's on Facebook, whether that's on YouTube, Twitch. Apparently now I have connected. This has been a great stream, a 3-hour stream. It just goes by so quickly, so quickly. All right, let's check in on the comments here. Let's see. Okay, we've got Quesadilla. Wish Dems would embarrass Johnson by pointing out to his constituents where they stand in comparison to Cali. Yeah, I mean, if the Dems won't do it, I sure as hell will. And I know people from Louisiana, some of the greatest people. And that's the problem, right? Like, in every state, it's okay. like, yeah, you guys vote red, but there are so many good, decent people in that state who don't see the world through that just distorted lens, and that's really, who we're fighting for, are those people, those women in these red states who need our support, and who need to see that people are out there, connecting with them. Let's see here. It doesn't look like my chat is refreshing on Streamlabs. Streamlabs, if you guys aren't aware, Streamlabs is like the software that I use to stream stuff. So let me open up YouTube and Facebook here, and check out the comments section just to see if maybe I'm missing something. If I can even find the comments. Here we go. All right. This might even find. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Future Americans will be shocked that we elected a felon to the presidency. When they see footage of January 6th and Trump rallies, they will start to understand what kind of people supported him. Yeah. Yeah. And that's what makes this election even more mind-boggling, is how people can watch January 6th and go, well, at least I won't pay those high taxes. Yeah, I'll put that guy back in the White House. All right. Let me check in with Facebook over here. We're 3 hours into the stream. I get it. People are tired. All right. Lenny, that is just heartbreaking about hearing that about those students. And that's exactly what Garcia was saying here. Like, you've got kids who are already in just these enormous struggles they're going through. And for, politicians to say that they're going to just make it so much harder on these people. Yeah, got to push back. So I'm going to end the stream there. It's a little over 3 hours. Thank you guys for tuning in. If anything else goes down throughout the day, I'll be here streaming. I'm going to take a break, hit the gym, and try to keep my mental and physical health, keep it going here. So I hope you guys are doing the same. I hope you guys are taking care of yourselves and looking after those you love, because everybody needs everybody right now. So thank you guys for watching. My name is Brendan with Reflect Politics here on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch. I'm over on Twitter. I'm also on Blue Sky, which I'm using more and more now. So yeah, be sure to follow in all those places, and I will see you guys in the